Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Blake. I'm your host for the evening. You're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to this wonderful panel that we have assembled. Very grateful for their time. The aim and the hope here is to keep this bouncing along as sharply and as quickly as we can. We don't want to keep you here all night. Great to see so many young people in the audience. We know what attention spans are like nowadays, so we'll do our best to keep the ball bouncing as best we can. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to quickly introduce you to our panel. You know them all, I'm sure. But given that this is a joint adventure between the ITBA and the ITBA Next Generation, we know that there'll be plenty of you in the audience that are curious about their backgrounds and how they got to where they are right now, God help them. So while we would encourage later on in the Q&A section, if you have specific questions to individuals or as a group, to by all means get involved, ask the questions. They're here to help and give guidance as best they can. So without further ado, man to my left, Cathal Beale, you all know him, CEO of the Irish National Stud. Good pal of mine, so flattering him doesn't come easily, but I'll do it briefly, because in fairness to Cathal, I think he is as good an example as we have in the industry of someone that has proven that you do not need to come from a racing background to get to very influential positions very quickly, based on merit and hard work. In fairness to Cathal, he went into the Irish National Stud course at the age of 23, if my research is right, which is a little bit later, one might say. And a little more than 10 years later, he walked back in through the gates as the CEO, which I think is incredibly impressive. And we'll give him his due and show our appreciation for him joining us here today. Thanks, Kevin. Next to Cathal, Dermot Cantillon. Now, I'll keep this brief now, because Dermot's trodden many a road in his day, so we won't give all the details. But from the mean streets of Tallow in County Waterford, Dermot, we all know him, of course, as the head of Tinnakill House Stud, which has been going for over 20 years. They're very proud to have produced a whole bunch of Group 1 horses. Red Evie, Alexander, Gold Run, Casamento, State of Rest. If I forgot one, he would have shot me, so I think we've got them all in there. And Dermot, as well as developing this highly successful business, he has given an awful lot back to the industry through his involvement in a whole range of industry bodies. Has been a chairman of the ITBA, chairman of ITM, director here at Goffs, a director at the Irish Equine Centre. I probably have forgotten some, but you get the message. This is a man that's been around all elements of the industry and has achieved an awful lot. And again, please show your appreciation. We're very grateful to have his knowledge here today. Now, further down the line, they're getting further away. Helena Burns, absolutely delighted to have Helena here. Equine reproduction vet with Anglesey Lodge Equine Hospital. And as well as that, she, along with her husband Paddy, head up the historic Locktown Stud. And in the rest of her time, she somehow manages to keep hold of a young family, 3 kids under the age of 6. So while we're very grateful to have Helena here, I have a feeling with that sort of schedule that this might be a bit of a welcome break for her. So don't go too hard on Helena, and make her 2 hours enjoyable. And we're really looking forward to getting Helena's insights and, as you can imagine, focus on equine reproduction, but on other issues as well. Please show your appreciation. Now, of course, we had to have a bloodstock agent, didn't we? Matt Coleman, Matthew Coleman, next to Helena there, from Shroud. Coleman, of course, highly prominent bloodstock agency, literally responsible for dozens of individual Group 1 winners over the years. They've been going for just under 20 years now, again, if my research is correct. And as you all know, Matt is omnipresent on the sales circuit under both codes, has his finger directly on the pulse of what the market is doing, which way it's moving, and that his insights will be very important to the discussion we're having this evening. So again, please show your appreciation for Matt. And finally, Barry Mahon, General Manager of Juddmonte. Juddmonte needs no introduction, of course, one of the leaders in the world of bloodstock for decades and decades, under the leadership of the late, great Prince Cathal Abdullah. Barry, while he has been a major part of the Juddmonte team for the last number of years, spent many years all around the world picking up experience in all sorts of roles, getting a very wide variety of experience that is serving him well in his current role and is also going to serve us well in what we're looking to do this evening. So again, please show your hands finally for Barry Mahon. Right, away we go. Again, I don't know how good a job I'm keeping of that ball bouncing, but we'll kick off here. The title of what we're doing here today, everyone, is Flat Breeding for the Modern Marketplace. So we want to keep this as practical and as applicable as we can. So I'm going to pose a scenario to the panel, and it might well be one that is factual, because I'm going to imagine that there's someone, maybe multiple people in the audience here this evening that are hoping to buy their first broodmare in the coming days in this ring at Goffs. They might not have the budget to top the sale, they might have to play at the lower to middle end of the market, and as we know, when you're playing at that end of the market, you're not going to be able to double tick the 3 boxes of confirmation, pedigree and performance. So I want to pick the brains of the panel that if they are given such an order, how they might approach it, what they're willing to give on, what they're not willing to give on. And the man I want to talk to first about this is Dermot Cantillon, a man who, of course, is always very active along with his son Jack in the broodmare markets. Dermot, if I gave you that order and you were to go to work tomorrow, which way would you be thinking?
Well, I suppose it's all about compromise. When you have a limited budget, it's all about compromise. So pedigree, performance and physique, for me, by far, it's pedigree.
Is what you won't give on.
But that's my emphasis is always on pedigree. I've standards. I never buy anything that hasn't black type in the first dam. That gets very boring, I think, over time, because I've been saying that for about the last 30 years. But so it has to have a minimum of some black type in the first dam. Now, physique, performance, you'd love to perform it. You'd love to have a beautiful mare physique, but we often buy older mares, and sometimes the foals are there, or we know the foals, we've seen them at other sales. So if the mare physique and her correctness has deteriorated over time, which happens with a lot of mares, they tend to toe in and that, we don't take any heed of that at all. When I'm at the sales, the more small problems I find, the better I like it, because the discounts come in with the problems. So you've a problem which should discount the mare by 5%, but it probably discounts it by 25%. So then, of course, we often buy a mare that reproductively has been challenging. So we were standing over there a couple of years ago, and we bought a mare that hadn't been in foal for 3 years. And for 23 grand, it was like going into Paddy Pound writing 23,000 to win that we get a few foals out of her, And she was called Olympian, and I gave it to Mita for Christmas. And she managed to get a couple of foals out of her, which we successfully sold. She was from the Ballymacall dispersal. So, I'm all into buying cheap, but buying mares of a certain standard, and I forgive on confirmation, and I forgive also on race record.
And on age, clearly.
Well, when you're as white as me, Kevin, you have to forgive on that as well,
Well, I think this might be a great chance to bring in Helena, actually. So let's develop the scenario, Helena. Dermot goes out and buys a 22-year-old mare that hasn't had a foal for 3 years and says, there you go, Helena, do your best with that. What's the process for you? That's an extreme example, obviously.
Yeah.
But what's the process for you in terms of evaluating probabilities and actions that you might take to help the situation?
Yeah, I suppose first of all, it's really important to have realistic expectations. I think we'll get to that when I've got a few slides here. But a mare that gets to over 15, over 12, there's certain benchmarks where their reproductive efficiency decreases. There's some recent studies to say it decreases by 7% year on year from about 12 on. So that's pretty significant. When we see that mare, I have a little picture. We don't see a mare, we see it's working, a uterus. Anyway, there's a picture of a internal reproductive organs of a mare here. So some things that start to happen as the mare gets older.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, great, here it is. Yeah, so this is what we see. When you bring your nice mare with a bit of wear and tear, this is what we see. The mares are badly designed in a way that the rectum, with all the feces, is above the vulva. As the mare gets older, that vulva sinks in towards the pelvis and sucks in more bacteria and air. That goes into this area that's supposed to be really sterile here, towards the cervix. You can also get a reflux of urine in there. Now, there are things we can do for that. The first thing you can do is a Catholics on the outside, that can straighten up and improve her conformation. Furthermore, with urine in the vagina, we can do a urethral extension to try and get some of that urine out of the vagina. But like these problems are multifactorial. They don't just have one thing. This is not just going to be a silver bullet job. You go then into the cervix. Maybe if you buy a barren mare for 3 years, you don't necessarily have a barren cert, but you don't have a guarantee that mare hasn't got a torn cervix or, in the internal os. So there are things that you don't know when you buy a mare, and that might be essentially no foal out of that mare, So it's fraught with risk, I suppose. Into the uterus then, you're looking at like your endometritis, your fluidy mares, the inability to evacuate fluid from the uterus. The older the mare gets, the more the muscle tone in her uterus degenerates. She can't squeeze that fluid out. She's more prone to bacterial infections. And then further on from that, I'm not going to bore you with this. My colleague Bina did a good talk before Christmas with the ITBA about managing your barren mare, and she deals a lot with this. Then you go up to the oviducts. This is where the sperm will travel up to meet the follicle, the oocyte. The sperm will stay there for 5 days. This is your time to get the uterus cleaned up. And then the pregnancy will travel down into the uterine body. Some of these older mares, the oviducts get blocked. You might have heard of a recent enough process where we're flushing the oviducts, either per uterus or laparoscopically. That allows that pregnancy to be released back down into the uterus and to survive. Another problem, again, when you get in an older mare, is the ovary. You get ovarian degeneration. The mare is born with the amount of oocytes she had from the start. They begin to degenerate over time. And also you get ovulation failure. Ovulation failure is about 5% in a young mare under 10. When you get to a mare about 14, 15, that can go up to about 15%. So if you think of all these factors sitting one on top of each other, it's a challenge. What's my next? In fact, Dermot's wife Mita was involved in this study that the key factors affecting reproductive success of thoroughbred mares and stallions on a commercial, well-run stud farm, the key factors that affected your ability to get a foal per cycle or a pregnancy per cycle were the mare's age was one of the most important factors they found, and the second factor was when they covered the mare. So mares covered back within 20 days of foaling had a 10% decreased pregnancy rate. And this is important because we really need to get those mares covered back within 25 days to actually keep a mare efficient. It's been postured to make profit on a mare. You need to have her having a foal, maybe having one barren year out of 6 or 7 years. And if you're constantly letting her drift, then you're going to get quicker to that barren year. So yeah, it's a challenge. And then you'll be, I think, surprised maybe by the next slide. These are the pregnancy rates. Maybe my pointer is working. The pregnancy rates per cycle for thoroughbred brood mares grouped by age. So we're just going to look at the UK, which is on par with Ireland. Age 2 to 8, you can expect for every time you cover the mare, 67% of mares will go on foal in any given cycle. And it gradually decreases. You get to over 18 and you think, that's not too bad. 54% of these mares will go on foal. It gets a bit more complicated than that. After that's for day 0 to 15 to 21. So as the pregnancy progresses, these mares aren't supporting the pregnancy adequately enough, and your over 18 pregnancy rate drops down to 37%. That's very disappointing, I imagine, for most breeders. If you're faced into buying a mare at 15 and you think that your mare at 15 has a likelihood of only 50% of being in foal at 42 days, So that's where I would be tempering my clients' expectations,
I'd say you better stop flicking the slides. You're going to ruin Dermot's night.
Yeah.
They're getting worse and worse for Dermot.
That's it,
Going back to that previous slide, why is it so much better in Australia than it is over here?
Yeah, that is an interesting one.
I'd say because they're out the whole time. You know what I mean? They're not so much in stables.
Is that why?
I'd imagine so. Yeah, that's the big difference for me is that they're out, the weather is better, that they do everything out. They foal out, they live out, and they only come in every now and then to be treated. So the natural habitat for a mare is out. So I think that would be the.
Yeah. We do find our pregnancy rates would increase later on in the season when the mares have more access to grass. Like those fluidy mares walking are actually continuously evacuating themselves. Like when they're in a stable, we try to put them beside a teaser and we use natural methods for them to evacuate themselves. But there is nothing like nature. Yeah.
So Helena, for all that the numbers say what they say, and that there are a lot of challenges if you're going to go for the older mare. What I'm taking from what you're saying is there are lots of routes you can take to try and help yourself and to intervene and try and help.
Yeah, I guess as first when your mare selection, when you're at the sales, I would look at things like First of all, look physically, like her feet, laminitis can be a really complicating factor in older mares, because if there's pain in the feet, it's releasing PG into the body, which is causing inflammation in the uterus and can abort pregnancies. And also, mares with laminitis are not going to withstand, heavy pregnancy, and will have a loss at that stage. The other issues of buying mare, I suppose you're buying something, you look at the conformation when you're buying the mare. These are things that you can do. You can check under the tail. Is it looking really sank, at this stage? Has she got a good hip shape? Like, you're looking for a good deep hip that's going to support a better uterine conformation. And then I suppose you can talk to the studs. A lot of studs have a really good open book policy. Like the likes of Cantillon will give you, all the mating history of the mare. So this information is available to you, and you can make an educated decision. Is she on treatment? If there's a gap in her reproductive history, if she's aborted, you can have this conversation. What is the reason? And then I suppose talk to your vet as well. Like, is this an acceptable risk? Like, this mare, has had one abortion. Okay, that's probably an acceptable risk. She's aborted twice in her life. That's a little bit more difficult, She's maybe a habitual aborter at this stage. So I suppose these are the things you have to consider, and things that you can do for yourself at the sales,
Yeah, look, again, like we said, this is just one angle. As Dermot said at the outset, I suppose if we're going shopping at the lower to middle end of the market, you're searching for value and reasons why what you like is going to represent value. We've covered off older mares quite nicely there, I think, in terms of weighing up the positives from Dermot and the potential pitfalls from Helena. Matt, I'm going to spin over to you now, because you're here. You're at every sale. I know you're a big value man, and you're a great man to pop up with a slightly left field one at the right price. Now we're going to disallow you from shopping for older mares. Dermot's going to buy all those. You're here for the next couple of days, 10 or younger. Is there any particular angles, reasons why horses will make less than that? Will make them a price that you consider value?
I'd go about it. Well, actually, I'll give you an example that was pretty similar. John Joe O'Neill, who I buy some jumps horses for, I'm sure you will know him, very famous national hunt trainer. About 5 years ago, he said to me, "Matt, my brother's got a little farm in County Cork," and John Joe wouldn't know much about flat racing. He said, "But I want to buy him a flat mare." So this was in the July sale in Newmarket, actually. He said, "If there's a mare or filly up there you see that will do a job for him, we'll trade away, try and breed a few foals out of, try and buy something." So how I go about it is I try and tick 3 boxes, which, one, I try and buy a winner. The reason being is if you get a filly foal, I think it's quite hard to sell fillies by cheapish stallions out of non-winning mares, whereas if you get a good-looking filly out of a mare that at least won a race, I think you can kind of trade and try and make some sort of profit.
Is a winner okay for you, Matt, or is there a rating cut-off point that you use?
Depends on the budget. If I had small budgets, then I'd just try and find a winner. Broodmare sire is quite important, as in the fillies or mare's sire. I'd try not to buy something by too much of a wacky stallion, because I do think pinhookers and trainers, everyone I think does look at the broodmare sire. So you wouldn't want to buy, for example, a broodmare by a really failed stallion, because I do think that puts people off. So yeah, I try and find a winner. The next factor is, just like Dermot, it has to have some sort of black type in the first dam, because you have to remember that the pedigree shifts down one generation when you're selling a foal or yearling out of the mare. So you need to have black type far enough up the page to get the horse on the looking list, because, like all of us, most of the catalogues are getting bigger and bigger nowadays, and we go through with our red pen going, no, 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 before we even get to the sales. So you have to have something on pedigree that is going to get people to open the door. And thirdly is the best physique you can get, because I've learnt the hard way buying, this if you're buying a young mare, if you're buying ugly fillies that can't walk, and you think, oh, well, she might produce a nice foal. In my experience, 8 or 9 times out of 10, if the mare can't walk and is not good looking, she's probably going to go throw a foal that can't walk and isn't good looking. So if you're trying to buy something that, like we all are, is trying to make you a few quid, I try and find something that can walk, is a winner, and has some sort of black type in the first dam. So the filly I actually ended up buying for John Joe was a Footsteps in the Sand filly, and actually Kathy Grassick was underbidder. which is even a better part of the story. But she was a footsteps in the sand filly. She was a winner of a moderate race. She was a sister to a horse who got some small black type, but she was in foal to Estikdar, who I think had one crop of runners at that point and was not setting the world alight. But because she was in foal to a bad stallion, she was a very good walker. But because she was in foal to a bad stallion, like Dermot was talking about, I actually thought, well, I might be able to buy her, because most of the posh guys are thinking, I don't want to mare in foal to Estikdar, so they just put a line through her. So I bought her. Cathal was underbidder, and she's turned out to be the dam of Warney, who's Joseph's Highland Reel, who won a stakes race this year. And she sold 2 6-figure yearlings, and she's been a great success. But I mean, there's that one worked. There's lots of others that don't. But I managed to tick the winner. She walked well, was pretty good looking, and she had black type in the first dam. And the fact she was in foal to a bad stallion actually appealed to me, because I think you can suck up one foal, and you're buying it for the longer term. So they're the sort of tick boxes I have. It's not easy to do, especially if you've got a limited budget, because if you do tick those boxes, then it is, they tend to make too much money. But like Dermot said, if you can find an angle that they're a cribber, or they're in foal to a bad stallion, if you can find something to put other people off, then you've got a chance, I think.
Yeah, and I hope you're all listening closely now, because there was more to that than you might think. Matt was telling you what he'd be doing if he was looking to buy a filly or a mare in the coming days. But there's also an insight there that you should have been paying attention to, because Matt will also be buying your foals, buying your yearlings. And I know from my own experience that an awful lot of agents, which are crucial for breeders, to please them, an awful lot of them will have tick boxes. I've come across agents that won't look at progeny out of mares that were rated less than 80, for example. Things like that. Some might set the bar lower or higher. And I think, just from a personal input, I think it's important to try and consider that, because someone said to me years ago, and it stuck with me, that when you're planning a mating or buying a mare, you have to ask yourself the question, who's going to buy what I produce here? And if you're 100%. Not ticking some of those boxes, you might find yourself a couple of years down the line sitting on the Beale with your foal and wondering why it's not happening, that you could have potentially foreseen that coming down the line. But I want to sling this over to Barry. I'm going to ask you the question slightly differently, Barry, just to be awkward, because you would be approaching the sort of scenarios we're discussing now from a different angle, I assume, in your role in Juddmonte, in that an operation of that size is going to have to do a lot of dispersing every year. I can only imagine it drives you all nuts. Probably a horrible part of the job. What I want to know is what are the factors that put the most fear in you when you're doing that job? Because there's surely plenty of cases where it's tight, it's borderline, one that you might not really want to go, but they have to go. What puts the fear of life into you when you're making those decisions?
So, Kevin, when you're selling any horse, there's a chance that it's going to come back and haunt you along the line. That's just the nature of the business. But we'll sit down, I suppose, we'll look at the families, we'll see how old the mother is, number one. If she's a young mare and she has 2 more fillies coming along behind her, this filly maybe in question was a 70 rated, one-time winner on the all-weather. We might say, well, look, we have the mare, we have 2 sisters coming along that are highly rated. Perhaps she's one to sell on. And plenty of times we've sold them and they've gone on and they've bred very, very good horses. But we still have plenty of the family, so it's still a great benefit. We mightn't directly have the mare, but we have enough of the family that it's enhancing the pedigree all the time. And it's improving it. So, unfortunately, you can't keep them all. You try and narrow it down as best you can. And, I think every year the Juddmonte draft, they're well sought after, and we have sold some very good fillies that bred some very good horses. I think I see a few members of Ballylynch in the crowd there. Green Room was one of them. She bred some very good horses, and there's been numerous other ones. Just a little bit to go back on your question to the guys, the scenario. The great thing about that scenario is there's no right answer, which is the magical thing about this industry. The man walks in and buys his filly for 1,500 quid, or Dermot buys his 15-year-old mare for 23 grand. You don't know which is the one that's going to lay the golden egg, and that's the great thing. Personally, I have a preference for the young mares. I think at the minute there's a little bit of value with a filly out of training. I think pregnant mares can be a little bit harder to buy. People want a quicker return, and I think if your budget allows you to be patient, there's actually great value in a young filly off the track, whether she's won a race or she's unraced, you'd probably, as Matt says, you'd like her to be rated, sort of 80 plus with our limited budget, or to be unraced if that's the way it is. But I think if they have a good pedigree, young filly there with a good pedigree, and you're starting with a clean slate, and you can make her out to the best of her ability.
And Cathal, I'm going to bounce into you with a specific, with the scope to broaden out. Barry just mentioned there buying unraced fillies. What's your personal view on that? Is that something you can tolerate, or is it a skip past?
I don't think of it in tolerating. We can tolerate anything. It comes down to budget at the end of the day, as everyone has said. Unraced, I don't mind. I prefer unraced to unplaced, or a filly who's proven herself to be not good. I think, look, we've all talked about it, like the race record. You want to get the laws of probability say that the higher the racing record is, the better chance you have. And I think everybody's alluded to it. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's all probability, and it's all risk, and that comes down to what budget you have and what you're trying to do. Are you trying to breed a mare in the long term? Are you trying to just turn it and move the mare along very quickly? So it kind of depends, and I think it's about taking a step back for a second and saying, well, what am I actually trying to do? And what am I trying to do is reflected on what is the goal here. Am I just going to flip these mares really quickly? Am I trying to just sell a foal? Am I trying to breed a racehorse? Am I trying to make the mare over a 7 or 8 year period? So that all has to come into it, I think, before you put your hand up in the ring. And just want to say as well, I suppose we're all talking about the buying side of it and generating the revenue at the far end of it, but just thinking about cost before you start. I think that's a very basic thing to say, but it's a very good place to start. Just know what your feed cost is going to be, what your vet cost is going to be. Have it lined out. I know you apply 15 grand or whatever when you're doing your from foal to yearling or whatever. I think that's a good place to start for everybody, to be honest with yourself and say, well, look, my time has a certain value, and the foal farrier's time, and all of those things. You've got to add all those things up and say, okay, well, now I can go and invest and go and buy the type of mare I want to buy. Yeah,
because I think it's fair to say, and we're probably all guilty of it to one extent or another, that we might say, well, she's only out in the field, she's not costing me much,
Down the back of the farm it still costs a few quid,
Exactly, and like you say, the cost of your own time as well should be factored in, because while there's plenty of people that will do it genuinely for a hobby, there is a cost to everything, and I suppose you do have to factor it in.
Well, yeah, but if you're doing it for a hobby, that's grand. You kind of own that, and that I'm doing it for a hobby. I don't expect it to, I'm willing to put 10 grand into the mare every year to keep it going. That's absolutely fine if that's what you're trying to do. But if most people are here to survive, to make a few quid, and to try and get your broodmare band up and try and improve the quality of the stock you're breeding and all that sort of stuff. We're all trying to do that, I think. So, revenue is only one side of the ledger, is all I'm saying. To make a profit, you've got to keep your costs as under control as you can before you try and, come in here and wave the catalogue, and that's the easy bit.
Yeah, and you're talking about it being one half of the equation. We've only talked about one half of the equation so far, in that we've only talked about mares. There's a whole other side to this equation, as we know. If our imaginary person in the audience is lucky enough to get the docket and bring the mare home, the next decision comes down to stallion, which is, as we all know, massively important. For what we're talking about, flat breeding in the modern marketplace, we're not just talking about individual stallions, we're talking about profiles, we're talking about trip profile. Are they proven, are they unproven? Do we go down the first season route? I think there's so much scope for variety and decision, but so much scope for pitfalls as well. I'm going to fling back around to Dermot. Stallions, you have a whole heap of mares to do your matings for every year. I suppose you have I would say the glorious problem of being able to spread risk across a lot of mares and have a lot of variety in your decisions. But what's your starting point?
My starting point is I put it down a list of the mares and a list of the stallions that I've shares in. and I never put down anything in ink. It's always in pencil, and I have a rubber at the top of the pencil so I can rub them out if it doesn't suit. But a couple of principles that I adopt in general, because as I say, things change, and one of which I always try to enhance what's best in the pedigree. A lot of people try to balance what's best in the pedigree, so they'll take a staying mare and they'll breed her to a sprinter. I don't. I breed a staying mare to a middle distance horse because I want to see what's best in the pedigree and I want to enhance that. And I suppose the emphasis also has been on speed in the last while, and I don't exclusively breed for speed. I like middle distance horses, and last year I had an old mare that we managed to get over all the probabilities of not going in foal, and we got her in foal to Nathaniel. And anyway, she had a colt by Nathaniel, and he was a crooked murder. He was offset, but could he walk? He had a fabulous walk. And I just kept marching up and down, and eventually, agents are not going to buy this horse. Coleman, you're not going to buy it.
I might.
But a good trainer will buy it. So John Gosden liked the horse anyway, and he ended up and with another good trainers. Trainers are always going to buy a horse with a problem like that, confirmation, because they've seen so many of them that have done well with confirmation problems. And I ended up getting 75 sterling for it. So, you just by going against the tide sometimes you're not competing with everybody else. You're competing in a small little corner, of the bell curve. I'm in the 5% in the corner. That's where I am. I'm battling away there, but it's not very populated.
Gotcha. And Matt, just to expand on that again, talking about different profiles. Dermot's talking about a middle distance type profile there. This is a big discussion in the industry for the last little while, speed versus stamina, etc. As a buyer, when you go to the yearling sales, even the foal sales, how do you find it in terms of orders, we'll say? Are you getting a lot of people saying, right, I want something by a sprinter, I want something bred to sprint, something that's early, or do you find more of a variety?
It depends on the client. I would say if there's any sort of trend with trainers when you're buying yearlings, I would say that they are edging towards more mile-plus horses, simply because that's where the resale market is better. And I mean, the flip side of that is fewer and fewer owners can afford to buy these horses and wait, because the training fees are so expensive, can afford to wait until these horses are 3 and 4 to reach their peak. But I feel that the trainers are edging that way. I think the sort of obsession 5 to 10 years ago with cheap speed, I think is gradually changing. I think different markets concentrate on different aspects in terms of the speed stamina question. I think the foal buyer market is much more speed orientated, because I think they're trying to buy that shapy, strong, racy, fast-looking foal. But I think the trainers are much happier to buy a staying horse, and are also much less selective on stallion. I think the pinhooking market tends to get very focused on certain stallions, whereas I think trainers, in my experience, are much more forgiving of stallions, and they probably go more on the mare record. Look, if the mare has had 3 horses rated over 90, and they like the horse, they wouldn't mind if it's by a stallion that's, semi-unpopular. But as a general trend, I do feel that trainers are edging away from those small little sprinty horses. I just think they think their margin for success is small, and if it's not quick and early and ready, it's probably not going to be that successful. And also trying to resell it for a profit to get the owner enough money to buy another horse, the margin for error is small, because if you're not a pre-Ascot horse, then you're probably not worth much money, and you're too small for Australia, too small for Hong Kong. And so I do think people are looking for the bigger, rangier, sort of mile-plus type of horse now.
And Dermot, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, just to reinforce what Matt said, coming here this evening, I did a lot of research, Kevin, and I got the Weatherby's fact book, and I went through it in minute detail. And the 2 big growth areas, actually, in terms of exporting horses, are the 2 areas that want to buy middle-distance horses, and they're Australia and Saudi Arabia. That have been the 2 big growth areas. So that reinforces that I think the tide is changing.
Yeah, look, I did a lot of work on this last year. We had an ITBA event like this about the speed, the distance debate. And like when you do look at the evidence and you look at the data, like it is quite stark in terms of how we breed our mares in this country. The sample of data used was 2022. Of all the flat mares, 55% of them were covered by stallions that never won beyond 7 furlongs. Only 20% were covered by stallions that won over 10 furlongs or further. So the breeders are voting with their feet. They're continuing to support speed stallions primarily. But as Matt has said, as you've alluded to there, Dermot, I'm sure nearly everyone in the room would agree. When you step back, when you broaden out the timescales you're looking at, the resale markets are heavily focused on the mile plus horse, massively so. The number of stakes races for that type of horse, is superior to the number of stakes races for black type horses. There's a million reasons to try and breed a 10 furlong horse, but we're not doing it. And look, there's a number of reasons why. And Cathal, I might come to you on this because, as we always say in these debates, you have to look at it as the full length of chain with the various links. And the link starts with the stallion. The breeder can't breed that type of horse if the appropriate stallion isn't available. And when we look at when we look at the population of stallions in Ireland, there's just not that many that fit that bill in a price range that is accessible.
Well, I think standing stallions, any of the stallion men here will tell you, the 6 furlong Group 1 winning sprinter, full, done. Before you get to the 1st of November, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's point and shoot. It goes. I think fundamentally it goes back to that gap in cost, as Matt said. And over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and I think it is changing. And I think Dermot's point is right. But there's definitely a sort of, it's so costly to keep a horse in training that we've got to get out. And everybody's in a position where they're trying to. Breeding to race is almost a luxury, for most people. It's really breeding to sell a foal. The foal market is the one that dictates and drives everything. It really does drive so much of the trade and so much of the, when we're making our pitch for somebody, use our first season stallion, you'll have a nice foal. It's really important that the foals sell well, and predominantly the 6 furlong foal will sell better than the 10 furlong foal, just on the law of averages. That's what has been the case. So how do you change that? Well, it has to be a sort of a systematic change. It can't just be the stallion man leading out there with his 10 furlong horse, finding nobody to come and breed to that horse, and then he's not going to do that again. Whereas the stallion man can go and get a 6 furlong Group 2 winner and fill it all day long. So it's a sort of a vicious cycle we've gotten into where, we're all breeding for speed because that's all we can do, because we can't afford to wait until the horse is, old enough to run to its best 10 furlongs halfway through his 3-year-old year. So there's a gap there for breeders, to try and convince them that this is the way to go. But they're saying, well, I have to get paid at the foal sales first before I do anything.
Yeah, and we do seem a little bit stuck in a vicious cycle, like you say. And look, when we have situations where I'll name names because it's better when you name names. when you have the likes of Adyar, Hookham, Westover, Coolmore will retire an array of really good mid-distance horses straight to national hunt ranks. So everyone does it, and they all do it for the same reason. Like you've said, Cathal, you retire a horse like that, and they can be a real struggle commercially. But I will give an example and maybe a glimpse of how we could potentially make this work as an industry, and it's a mad one, and it's Stradivarius, because I think there was plenty. It's fair to say now, if we're all honest with ourselves, there was plenty of wry smiles when Bjorn Nielsen decided to retire Stradivarius as a flat stallion at the fee he did. Ask a Gold Cup winner, how can this possibly work? And there was a lot of wry smiles, but in fairness to the man, he put in place a whole bunch of incentives and bonuses, put his money down, and look at the return he got. He covered 120 mares in his first season, and you look at the return of mares, and because of the incentives and bonuses that were put in place, he now has a genuine chance to prove himself to be a viable flat stallion, which I would have priced up at 100 to 1 and happily given you all whatever you wanted this time last year. So is that a glimpse of what might need to happen? That some of the farms, and we won't pitch it as for the greater good, but we know it's for the greater good. At the end of the day, these things have to be commercial. But our self-help schemes, our bonus schemes, our incentives like that, a way to maybe kickstart the thing. And like you say, if you stood a stallion, not like that, that's an extreme example, but one that's currently considered borderline, maybe a Westover, maybe an Adyar, who were pretty close, I'd imagine, to getting a role in Ireland or the UK, if there were some bonus incentives put in place there, that breeders in this room might say, okay, that's a very reasonable offer. I have a reasonable opportunity to make a return. And they might just take the chance. Because I suspect there's plenty of people in Ireland that want to breed that type of horse, but the type of stallion just isn't there. So someone has to make the jump and someone has to do it. But maybe Bjorn Nielsen's onto something there.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. You know what I mean? Like if the Stradivarius foals come and sell well at flat sales, there's no reason why they won't, because he's a really good-looking horse. He's a seat of stars. It's all there, and he's overcome the most difficult part in getting 100+ mares into him in the first year. But for most stallion farms, it's not commercially viable, I suppose, to try and. He's put a huge amount of effort into doing that. In fairness to National Stud in England, they've marketed him well and they've gotten the story out. And he's ran a huge ad campaign, and he's put his money where his mouth is with the bonuses. So I hope it works. Personally, I think it'd be great, and maybe that would be the kind of gateway for more of these horses to come through, because I think we are probably better at breeding 10 furlong horses than we are at breeding 5 furlong horses, which is a point you've made before, but it's the evidence backs that up, that we're actually naturally better at doing that, but we're not aligned in what we're doing because we can't afford to be. And it's the affordability issue that's probably the main driver of this. If we can make that kind of gap between, for breeders to be able to get paid at a foal sale for a 10 furlong horse, well, I think behaviour will change. And it probably already is to a degree, to Matt's point.
And Barry,
You have to remember, it's supply and demand. And for the last 10 years, the demand was for fast horses. That's what the market wanted. Every trainer that had an order, they wanted a fast 2-year-old. If they had an order to buy a few on spec, they wanted 2-year-olds. There's a huge shift. Last year especially, most trainers that were buying a few on spec, they were buying 3-year-old middle distance horses because they know that they have great salvage value. Trainers again with small syndicates, they were buying a 3-year-old middle distance horse. I think as that demand grows, the supply and the middle distance horse will start retiring to stud. As you said, some of them horses that won derbies, they went straight into national hunt sphere. I think you'll start seeing them coming back into the flat circle, and if they're good enough to make it in that circle, great, and if not, then they might follow into the national hunt. But there's definitely a huge shift away from your 5 furlong, 6 furlong fast 2-year-old, because everyone, as you said, there is no salvage value post-Ascot.
I think it is turning at the end user end, and it's moving, and I think that we all would have noticed, I'm sure there's some very sharp pinhookers now that are looking for that type of foal to bring back as yearlings, and are doing quite well with it, so I think the tide is turning, and like we said, there's a million reasons why we should be doing this, and it's moving down the line gradually, but the next step is for the stallion man to have a punt, and it's not easy. We know it's not easy. No one would ever claim it is, but that's where we need to start from, I think. And it would be great if there was more given a chance, because we've seen now, it's a slightly broader conversation. We see the way they operate in France, where their bar for what's acceptable to give a chance as a stallion is quite a bit lower in both codes. Imagine Galloway had retired to Ireland, initially. He wouldn't have got 10 mares. He got a chance there, and now he's one of the more progressive sires in Europe. I think the correlation between racehorse performance and end value as a stallion isn't as closely correlated as we'd like. And I think giving more stallions opportunities can only be a good thing for the breed. We just need to make it pay for the breeders along the line as well.
Yeah, I think from my experience, the pinhookers have a huge influence in this. If I sell a lot of foals, and I sell them to pinhookers primarily, 1 or 2 go to end users, but the pinhookers are so professional, and they all home in on the same foals. And at this point in time, it would definitely you'd be very difficult to sell beyond a mile to a pinhooker. Maybe that'll change. But when you try to sell a horse at the yearling sales, then I'll often keep back middle distance type foals for the yearling sales, because the trainers tend to be, at this point in time, now that might change, but the trainers would tend to buy the middle distance horses more frequently, I think, than the pinhookers. Just getting back to Stradivarius, as a breeding right holder, I think he's a great chance.
But I'll tell you, just to broaden it out again, just as you mention it, I think the subject of breeding rights and stallion shares, etc., is an interesting one in itself. I think breeding rights have become much more popular. I think, there's so many breeders in the audience. I know you're a big fan, Dermot. I think it's fair to say that breeders, the small breed, I always characterise small breeders as the gold panners of the industry. They're the ones that put their money where their mouth is and try out all these unproven fillies. They're often the ones that are trying out the unproven sires. And then the dams that breed group horses and the stallions that take off, all of a sudden they're gone. They have to sell up, or they can't get involved in the stallions anymore. Whereas if they have the opportunity to get in as breeding right holders, they're potentially in for the full journey, for better or worse. And I know, Dermot, it's something that you've got involved in quite a bit.
Well, I've got involved in. I prefer shares, to be honest. I like being for the equity. It's a nice model for people that have stallions to sell breeding rights, but for someone that's in for the long term, I think we all prefer shares, because you're getting the equity, you're getting the bonus money, you own a piece of the horse. Breeding rights, of course, are much less expensive. So yes, they have a role, but personally, I prefer shares.
Yeah, just conceptually, I suppose, is the thing, a breeder, giving the breeder the opportunity to get in for the longer role. And I know you guys sell shares as well, Cathal and Stallions.
Yeah, we actually tried breeding rights a while back. It didn't really work for us, because our clients prefer to have the equity, and I think it's a great option for breeders if they have a number. Probably not for a breeder who has 1 or 2 mares, but for breeders who might have 10 or 12 mares and like a stallion, to be able to claim a chunk of them, you know what I mean? And it's ownership, it's equity in the horse. So the great benefit of a share is that, yes, you have your breeding right, but you also have a cut of the money. If the horse happens to be successful, especially is when you have that lift-off period in year 5 or 6. If you're lucky enough to have a stallion that goes, up through the ranks, you're onto a winning lottery ticket then, and hopefully. The stallion shares are usually priced very competitively, so that, if you do like the horse and you use the horse 3 or 4 times, and you had intended to use him 3 or 4 times in the first 4 years anyway, it should nearly pay for itself in terms of nomination fees anyway. So you get the chance to sell your foals that you've bred, but you're basically after, once the 2-year-olds hit the track, you've got a free bet. It's like having a money back guarantee from Paddy Power, so it's there for you. And if the horse takes off, great, and if it doesn't, well, you've lost nothing really finding out.
Sorry, Kevin, the conversation has probably moved on a little bit, but I feel we're probably underestimating the impact of the mare a little bit in all this. I just wanted to something else about the older mare. The older mares that are kept and we're continue to produce from at this stage, we're producing from them because they're after producing maybe 1 or 2 black type horses. And I suppose, do we consider, is there a bias against these mares when you're buying the progeny of these, and should there be? There's actually a lot of good studies out at the moment that would account for, that they investigate the progeny of older mares. And I think when you take away a statistical bias, which is that a lot of older mares are sent to unproven stallions, the likes of your first season stallions, and that really decreases their statistics on the track. But actually, if you take away that bias, older mares that have produced 1 or 2 stakes horses have a far higher chance than the average population of reproducing that. I think, again, with the likes of your Stradivarius, your staying horse, I think if you have a good mare, a good producing mare with solid physical that's producing good sound horses on the track, you can probably deviate a little bit on your stallion, because I think actually the heritability is quite high in a mare. If you think about stallions that are operating really well, are operating at 5% stakes winners to runners, whereas your really good mares can have anything up to, say Hassili was 70% stakes winners to runners. The heritability from a mare to her offspring is far higher. So just from the point of view of people, if you're investing in a mare, I would put nearly all of my budget on a mare relative to this stallion in a way, because if you can produce the proper looking offspring and from a mare that has a good proven record, I think that's really a no-brainer as well, and it's a big important thing to consider.
Yeah, because
sorry, Kevin, I think that's a very interesting point, because I find a huge bias, when they come around. Looking at my stock,
Right.
Some people, some trainers just completely write off all the males. They just want.
Yeah,
I think it's laziness, to be honest. They must look at the bloody horse.
Yeah,
but
no, and all the statistics would
but
actually prove
I like the way you've talked about the bias being introduced by the first season sires, because a lot of people disregard that. But actually, what happens? You put an unproven mare to a proven mare to an unproven sire. Of course, straight away you're diminishing the chance, because that sire is only probably about a 20% chance at best of being a successful sire. So 80% bias straight away.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for sharing that this evening, because they might look at my horses next year. So.
Yeah, well, everybody thinks that young mares breed the best racehorses, and yes, they do. I suppose they're the most profitable because they can have the foals year on year on year, and these mares can't. But that young mares are inevitably bred to proven stallions because you don't generally send an unproven mare to an unproven stallion. Whereas later on, then those mares you've already said, well, she's had 5 winners, she's a reliable source of winners. We'll try all our, our first season stallions are, everything else. So that's, I think that's just something to consider.
Barry?
Matt, I have a feeling we're going to hear that sales pitch next October.
Well, as an aside to that, and going back to the idea of trying to find mares for value, I think that mares who have produced not necessarily black type, but good rated horses, I've found a bit of value the last few years buying mares, especially from big operations, Dali, Juddmonte, Aga Khan, etc., out of mares that have produced, they might have had 4 or 5 foals and 2 of them are rated, say there's one that's 89 and one that's 96, but they're not black type. So to the uninitiated or unresearched, they just look like they produced a couple of winners and they're not much good. But if you can buy that mare and breed from her, when her stock comes around in the yearling market, most of the yearling buyers now are armed with these ratings books that they have the ratings of every one of the mare's progeny. And if she's had a couple of 90s, even if they're not black type, that'll get on most lookers' lists. And I think that's a bit of an angle and a niche that is underappreciated in the buying foals and buying mares. Black type is a bit of an artificial impression of the quality of a racehorse. For example, I bought a mare here in November off the Aga Khan. She was 11 or 12, and she'd had 5 horses rated over 90 from 6 runners. One of them was black type, and she was in foaled Glen Eagles, and I bought it for €42, which I thought was an astonishingly cheap price for her. Every runner she's had has been good, proper good. But because only one of them had got a little bit of black type in the French provinces, I don't think anyone wanted her. But I'm hoping when that Glen Eagles foal or yearling comes round, everyone's going to go, God, this mare's never missed. But I think there is when I'm buying foals as well, I'd much rather go on the mare's produce record. I mean, this year I bought a foal to pinhook for myself by Magna Grecia, who, as everyone knows, had a disappointing start. But the mare had 3 runners all rated over 90, and I thought the foal was very nice, and he made 10 grand. And I think when I roll him back into a sale, there'll be enough people that will forgive Magna Grecia out of a mare like that I can make profit on that. But most people won't even look at Magna Grecia, so he's useless. But eventually he will throw a good horse because he covered so many good mares. He's going to. That's just an example. I'm not just getting up on Magna Grecia. There's lots of stallions like it, but I think you can find angles that you don't just have to go follow the tide and you have to buy a sexy sire or buy a mare that's had black type. You can find angles.
Yeah, and just to put a number on what you've been talking about there, actually, because this is an area that I have a bit of interest in, and I did a bit of a study there with the help of Weatherbees a couple of years ago, and it focused in on the ratings of a mare's first 4 foals, subsequent ratings, and the percentage of those mares that produced 1 or more that got up to 90 plus. It's all the way, it's less than 20%. You look at those, and we'll do these sales, and there's plenty of them here, even in the next couple of days, that have produced 90 plus horses. I don't think it would be widely appreciated that it's not easy to do that, and that if you have a mare that's done that, that's a big old tick beside her for me. And like you say, the market can sometimes completely run past that for a variety of reasons. It might be age, it might be cover and sire, what have you. And I know that if I was given the hypothetical order that we spoke about at the outset, that'd be a way I'd be fishing. Just to quickly move on to something slightly different, Barry, because again, you'd be so heavily in this, that we all would be to one extent or another, in terms of your matings. A subject that I know would always generate a wide variety of answer. In terms of nicks, various crosses, is this something you guys have the luxury of breeding to race, is this something you pay much attention to, or not so much?
Definitely, yeah, no, it definitely is. I think it's all about giving yourself a statistical chance, and the highest statistical chance you can. And we've seen in years gone by with Galileo and Dane Hill, or now at the minute with Frankel and Dubawi or Pivotal, when you come across a nick like that, anything is possible. And when a certain stallion can be running at 7, 8, 9, 10% stakes winners, maybe when you take that particular cross out of it, or that particular nick, that can be running at 10, 12, 13%. So I think it's definitely something, we sit down every year list the mares and list the stallions, and we'll be probably the first thing that we look at, and we'll say, well, look, that's a stakes win in Dubawi filly. Physically, she suit Frankel. The cross works so well, as we've seen, and it's easy mating from there. But yeah, it's definitely very, very important.
Now, I have to say, now I am a skeptic of crosses personally. No. I think that the ones you've mentioned there, Frankel over Dubawi, world's best. Jesus, we got a good horse there. What a surprise.
Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, you have to give yourself the highest percentage chance of success. And that crosses work. Like Adiyar, Adiyar, when Adiyar appeared on the scene there, the mare was getting a little bit exposed. Big scopy horse there, and he turned out to be a very good racehorse. And that was probably the start of that cross, and we've seen it time and time again that it works well. But look, it's the old saying, breed the best to the best and hope for the best, and that's the way it works out.
Yeah, and I say I'm a skeptic now, but it doesn't mean I don't think about it, because at the end of the day, if we're like most people in this room would be, you're breeding for the market, and if the market clearly does think a lot about crosses and nicks, and I know sometimes if you come across one in the course of your matings, if it's something you can lean into and something you can say when you're sitting on the bale below at the mat when he comes down, you see this cross,
man.
You'll
be at the door saying it, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to be a believer to be a proponent, if you know what I mean.
You do see, even, I don't know what Matt's opinion is, but you do see it a lot at the sales too, even with agents and trainers. They'll hone in on a horse, it'll have a few imperfections, a few faults, won't be for everyone's cup of tea, and they'll come down to the horse walking around the ring, they'll put up their hand and they'll say, that's a very good cross, I'm able to handle, he toes in or he toes out, or he's a bit big or he's a bit small, but it's a great cross. And, there is plenty of trainers that actually will buy yearlings on that basis.
Matt, will the breeders here be able to swoon you with some cross information?
You'd have often said to me when you were looking at a year, and you'd say that's a good cross.
Yeah, maybe. I could have. I'd probably, if I'm in terms of crosses, I'd probably try and find something that was a bit more radical, like rather than Frankel Dubawi. I might have noticed that, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but Stallion has had. There is
Star Spangled Banner over High Chaparral. Look that one up.
Although Lope de Vega, I know suddenly.
Old Vic Mayors.
Oh, Vic Mayors.
Find them, yeah.
Lope de Vega has got a very good nick with Nathaniel, because I think he's had 3 runners already over 100, I think. You sometimes find those funny nicks. That would interest me more than... I do take that Frankel is outstanding with Dubawi, but I probably don't have the budgets to buy one of those.
You're looking, that's from a judgment point of view.
Yeah, sure, yeah, cool. Yeah, but I'd try and find something different.
From a commercial breeder's point of view,
yeah.
I even, I still would be, and just a few years ago, Chamerdal mares worked well with Kodiak, and there is plenty of examples.
See the Stars, King Mambo.
And a slightly different way of approaching it, whether you're doing matings or buying horses from pedigree, rather than the cross in particular. I quite like when the sire or the sire line has worked with the family further down. So that's a different way of doing a cross or a nick. But I've had a bit of luck buying horses that turned out to be very good racehorses when there was this horse is by a sire that's either the sire line or that sire in particular has worked maybe in the 2nd or 3rd dam. I've had a couple of horses I've bought over the years where that's repeated, especially if it's slightly an off the wall stallion that you might be in a filly in the 2nd dam had produced a stakes horse by X sire, and this foal or yearling is by that sire. That's a pattern that you don't spot it very often, but sometimes you can see Star Spangled Banner. You might see the Star Spangled Banner group horse in the 3rd dam, and you might say, all right, well that's worked with it. I kind of like that as a pedigree angle as much or more than a cross.
Right, we'll back away from the specific for a minute and go broad. The general health of the flat market. I think, Cathal, I'm going to come to you on this one, because I think, look, the numbers are the numbers. There seemed to be quite a notable correction in the yearling market last year after a real beano of a year in 2022. Now, the foal sales were quite strong, I think it's fair to say, considering that. Were the yearling markets indicative of maybe cool winds getting a little bit cooler going forward, and the foal buyers were guilty of sticking their fingers in their ears and ignoring it all, or was it just a blip?
Was it just a blip? I think you said the most important part at the beginning there when you said on the back of 2022. 2022 was an absolute beano. It was a record year and it was exceptional. There's no doubt anybody who stood, in any sales ring towards the back, especially as the season went on, I think it kind of got worse. But on the sort of last day of the non-select sales everywhere, it was definitely very, very tough. The clearance rates in particular dictated that. So the market, in the yearling market overall, was down 10%. But to caveat that off the back of 2022, if you compare it, over a 5-year period or a 6-year period, it wasn't quite as bad. But so you have to caveat it that way. But I think, look, there's no doubt the yearling market was tough, and the full market was probably a little bit stronger than the yearling market was. But like the geopolitics of things are, we're always going to be susceptible to what's going on outside. Even though we have our own little bubble here.
God bless it, yeah.
Yeah, God bless it, yeah. You often come in here and say, "Jesus, does anybody read the paper out there?" Thank God they don't, But there is an effect. There is an effect. We all saw it here in 2008. I mean, everybody remembers the day, the bank crashed the night before. Yeah, Lehman Brothers, and we had probably the worst day we've ever had here that day. So it does affect it. But I think going forward, I think in fairness to the stallion men, I think they have sort of corrected, and the prices have, and daggers coming at me, but I think a lot of them have, to be fair, and I think you have to. I think it's incumbent on us to be fair to breeders and notice that there has been certainly a cooling from the high of 2022.
And Dermot, you're on the Beale, you're rocking away, yearling foals, yearling market, foal market.
Love that Beale.
What was your feel?
I think it's a simple case of pure economics. Do you know what I mean? If anybody's ever studied economics, it's supply and demand. And so last year we ran into a situation where we had an oversupply and demand was the same or less. I think actually when you look at the number of horses that were actually sold, at a certain period of time it was significantly more than last year. But then after that, then it fell off a cliff. The orders ran out. It's simple. We have this thing where's ITM? Get them in. Get them 200 horses to where? There's nobody to buy them. It's a simple thing. You have so many horses. You have so many buyers. And when the buyers went out, crash. You know what I mean? That's what happened last year. The buyers weren't there. The second sportsman's here. First day was grand. Second day fell off a cliff. And it was similar with other sales. And that's a simple case of supply and demand. The demand just ceased to exist.
Matt, you've seen this from the other side. You were going around taking advantage of poor old breeders all through the yearling sales when the market dipped. Were you going around clipping your heels in delight, or how did you find it?
I think it's seriously tough. I mean, I can talk from my client's perspective of buying for a number of trainers in the UK. Small to medium-sized trainers are finding it increasingly hard to sell racehorses to owners. It's just a very hard product to sell at the moment in terms of the cost of buying the horse, the training fees, and particularly in the UK, the prize money. It's just a very hard sell at the moment. And I definitely feel that the trainers last autumn were on their heels a little bit about buying too many on spec. I think they were just getting a little bit scared that where are my owners coming from? How am I going to sell these yearlings? And I definitely felt amongst our normal clients that they are on their heels a little bit, and they're a little bit panicky about the industry over the next few years. Just in terms of trying to attract owners to buy horses, I think they're finding it harder than they were.
So I suppose one wonders if that became more of a thing, what do we do? Do we need more auction races, more median auction races? I think those have been brilliant in Ireland in particular. They've served a really good function. They've created a really vibrant marketplace for resale. Is this a route we should go down further?
Yeah, well, I think it's very simple. Everything we can do to get people to buy yearlings, that's where it is, because it is a knockdown effect. Then the pinnacle gets paid, the breeder gets paid, the stallion man gets paid. It knocks down all the ways back. So money put in at the yearling stage, is a huge effect. That is the key. So that's what the emphasis always has to be, to get people to buy horses by incentivizing them anywhere we can, come up with new ideas, because that is such a big knock-on effect.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the weaker links on the chain, because as we talked about, the resale market for tried horses has never been as strong. Is that a fair comment? There's unbelievable market there for a tried horse of pretty much all levels, bar the basement. And look, we know that Saudi Arabia, Dermot's already mentioned the export stats. The Saudi Arabia are already doing that, and they're currently planning on building like multiple new tracks. They're going to need horses. Where are they going to come? They're going to come here. They're going to come to the UK, and we're going to need horses to sell them, unless our market's going to get stripped out. So we need to make that link of the chain stronger. So we have more people trying these horses, getting them in training. You can look them in the, and I think you can look them in the eye and give them that pitch for all the challenges that Matt says with training fees and costs being high. You know, the end of the story is quite encouraging, I think, in that if your horse gets to a level, you will get them sold very well, assuming, you know, all the particulars are in order. So, you know, I think the resale market, I know John Gosden has spoken about it before, the fears of, you know, British and Irish racing becoming nurseries for the Middle East, for Australia, etc. But this is a room full of traders, and that's one thing I dare say that will survive, regardless of how our racing product fluctuates. I think Britain and Ireland will remain, and particularly Ireland, of course, will remain the best place to produce a thoroughbred, to bring them on, and to get them started.
I think to Dermot's point, like talking about supply and demand, like we've got a limited amount of demand stimulus that we can do, and the IRE is one of the things that we've obviously, with the ITBA, worked very hard on, and it's stimulating in the right place, and the right place is the middle market. We feel, you know, it's that sort of the 60 horse to the 90 horse. They're the ones that most people have. They're the median horse that's there. They're the ones that if a horse wins a race, ideally it should pay for itself, you know, or pay for a large amount of the training fees. That's what the goal has to be. Oh, yeah. That if a horse is capable of winning a maiden off of 70 or 75 or whatever it is, that there's enough there for them to pay for it, or at least come back in here and buy another one, that they can at least have the resale value then. Because if they can get to 75 and stay 10 furlongs, they're going to get out. Yeah. You know, they're going to get out if they can do that. So it's that sort of 60, 65, 70, 75, 80 rated horse that we've got to try and stimulate those guys who've done well. Like, they've had a winner. It's you know, how many horses go into training and don't win? Quite a percentage. So if someone's had a winner, you'd like to think that they've had a good experience and they're going to come back and buy another yearling next year. So it's about trying to drive that, I think.
Yeah, and I think I know it's a discussion that's been had on high, and it's a discussion about prize money in Ireland. And there is a question to be asked that, you know, half the horse population in Ireland is rated below 70. You know, is prize money too high at the lower level? Should prize money be lower? Should we systematically be trying to stimulate turnover of horses? You know, should we be rewarding people for keeping a 55 rated horse in training? Would we not rather them as a business to maybe call it a day with that horse and come back to the yearling sales and pay those training fees for a newbie coming through that could be a better horse? You know, is this something we need to do? And I know there's a very much a counter to that argument, but is that something that we should be doing? You know, our racing product at the end of the day is the end of a huge cycle that comes before, and should the end not be trying to stimulate the beginning?
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I'm a firm believer in that. You know, the key spot in the whole chain to generate income completely down through it are the yearling market. Guys buying new cars, buying new horses. That's what the stimulation should be. And because, you know, once somebody buys a yearling, as I say, it goes down to the pinnock, it goes down to the breeder, it goes down to the stallion, and it gets 4 bites of the cherry. So yeah, that's the key. I think that we should be refocusing on, for me, on 2-year-old races.
And look, guys, we've covered an awful lot of ground there. We've jumped around an awful lot. That's my fault. I'm not very good at this, but we will open the floor. 2 questions. I'm conscious of time as well. We don't want to keep you here all night. Feel free to ask absolutely anything you want. And there'll be microphones going around as well, so stick your hand up. Do not be shy. You see Hannah there, Connor's up behind as well. So stick your hand up. I'm actually going to start. I have a question.
You'll be starting.
No, because I have an important question for Helena that I'm sure is going to get asked anyway, but I'm going to kick it off just while the lads circulate and people lose their shyness and stick their hand up. Helena, a big thing for a lot of people in this room is the EVA situation. What's going on there, what protocols look likely to be put in place or have already been put in place that's going to impact things that we as breeders have to do to address the issue?
Yeah, I suppose at this stage, so we're already getting ready for our covers. Maybe you've got your CEM, EVA, EI taken at the beginning of the season. You'll more than likely have to repeat that. So at the moment there's no supply of vaccines for EVA to the stallions in Ireland, and so the studs have taken measures to protect their stallions from EVA. The main measure that most studs are taking is that you have to take a blood for EVA from your mare within 28 days of cover. Now you have to look up, different studs have different protocols. Some studs require that it's within 28 days of each and every subsequent cover. Some studs would like 2 EVAs, one at the, maybe in January, and a second EVA within 30 days. So do refer to your own stud, but it's something to be really cognizant of because of the fact that the equine centre, I suppose they process them, just logistically, they process them at 9 a.m. every morning, sharp. Then on Thursdays, the last one of the weekend is Thursday at 9 a.m. So if you don't, it's not ran on Friday, you'll have it Monday, Tuesday. So if you've got a mare for cover on Saturday, if your EVA gets in on Thursday afternoon, you potentially won't be able to cover that mare. So you need to be really cognizant of that in your lead up to cover. And I think that's something the breeders will have to be really on top of with their own mares. And the fact that it has to get into the equine centre before 9 a.m, it's probably no use saying to a vet at 11 o'clock at the rounds that, she needs her EVA for the weekend. So the equine centres have been really good as well. They've reduced the price of this subsequent EVA down to €15. So this has been a really good initiative by them. And it is, unfortunately, it's going to add a little bit of frustration to the spring proceedings, but I think if we're organised, we can proceed as normal, just be aware of that weekend situation.
Super. Well, do we have a first question from the audience? I hope we do.
I actually do have one.
Excellent.
So if I'm a first-time buyer, don't have mares, I'm looking at the sale, say tomorrow or coming up in the next few weeks, she's in foal. So I have a mare, I now have a new foal, and I now need to get her covered. What costs am I looking at? And what veterinary fees? What swabs do I need to get when I'm going to the covering shed? And what do I need to do with that foal when it kind of comes to registering? So for anyone who's getting into it new, what are the basics that you might consider?
Who wants to put their hand up?
Yeah, I can start with it, but there's that's a pretty open-ended question because so initially you'll have to get all your pre-breeding things. You can imagine that a straightforward mare might cost somewhere around €500 to get in foal, up to 1,000, depending on interventions after foaling. But this is really generalised. Your more complicated mares may require any of the above treatments I was talking about. Registering your foal and the paperwork thereafter to rear a foal. I'm not sure, maybe somebody will be able to answer it a little bit better, but I suppose from the veterinary point of view, anyhow, you'd have to budget up to 1,500 to get your mare in foal.
Yeah, so I suppose taking it line by line, obviously you have to pay your foal levy, which is dependent on the price of the nomination fee. So obviously the lower the nom, the less foal levy you have to pay. I think the highest is €650 for your Frankels and your very, the top end stallions, but the foal levy goes from, I think it's €35 up to 650, so you have to factor that in. You would have, obviously, your feed, your bedding. It depends if you're rearing this horse at home on your own farm. Obviously, you can do that at relatively lower cost than if you're boarding it somewhere. But boarding is obviously going to add to your cost. But even at home, you've still got to feed, you've still got to provide bedding. You still got to fold the mare down. So if you have the skills to do that, fine. Or the time, not so much the skills, I suppose. As your mare, as we all know, she may look like she's going to fold, but might hold for 2 or 3 weeks, or she might go, earlier than you think, and all of that. So, you have to decide whether you're going to fold her down yourself. You decide whether you're going to sell her yourself. Are you going to consign the foal yourself, or are you going to use one of the consigners to do that for you? So you've got all those sort of costs to look at, and there'll be commissions attached to that. There'll be one-off day fees for your consigners. There's obviously, if you're bringing the foal to the sales, you'll have your entry fee and your commission fee there. So I mean, as a rule of thumb, I don't know, Dermot, it's certainly going to cost you about 10 grand at least to get from one year to the next year, and possibly more, maybe closer to 12, 15 grand I would say.
Yeah, I think a good bit of advice is rather than try to buy a cheap mare, maybe 4 friends get together and buy a decent mare. You know, the costs stay the same per unit, but your chance of getting a good payday at the sales is much higher. So the cost as a percentage of the overall project is much less. So my advice to anybody starting off would be get together. I think a lot of people are doing that in Pinnock, you know, it's a committee a lot of the time comes to look at your horse. So maybe when it comes to looking at the mares, it might be worth doing the same. You know, buy a decent mare and 4 people, 5 people get together. That's what my advice would be.
Next question, if we have one, or else I'll have to intervene. Oh, everyone's getting involved now. Brilliant. And Conor, we've one here, Hannah. Thank you.
Mine was just on when you were talking about buying a mare on a budget as well, and unraced versus unplaced mares came up, or fillies. And I was just wondering when you said, I think it was you, Cathal, when you said that you would prefer an unraced filly over an unplaced filly because, you know, with an unplaced filly, you know she wasn't very good. Would that be from a purely commercial perspective when selling a foal? Because if a mare is unraced, you can assume fairly confidently that she probably wouldn't have been any good.
Well, Matt maybe might answer the kind of commercial side of that, but just in terms of trying to breed a winner, like I would always non-scientifically assume a rating of about 70 for an unraced mare. That's just me. I just kind of think that's the likelihood, you know, maybe lower than that. But an unplaced mare who's rated 45 is obviously below that. So that's why I would kind of deem an unplaced mare below an unraced mare. But commercially, you'd buy a yearling out of an unplaced mare or an unraced mare?
I probably wouldn't, but I'm probably different to most people. As I said before, I'm much more based on the mare's either race performance or a produce performance. Like, I love buying out of well-performed mares that didn't get black type. If they're just a winner of one race, but they're rated 97, I think most people, particularly in the foal market, would just look at that no difference to a mare that was a winner rated 60. So I focus probably more on ratings than other people do.
Dermot?
Yeah, I remember reading in a Cathal book that was published a number of years ago, where it was kind of like a centenary book, I think, where they went back through all the families and they looked at all the ratings of the horses. And the one thing that I remember from it, I'm open to correction, but if a mare achieves a rating of 18 as a winner, the statistics behind that mare getting a good horse go way up, you know. So that was the key finding for me, that if you can find a mare of 80 or above, the chance of breeding a good horse is very much higher.
Now, one thing I'd say, just to play a bit of devil's advocate, is I've seen those studies, and they'll show you the line with the rating of the mare correlating with their chances of producing a stakes horse, etc. And I just can't always help look at those data sets and go, but that's not telling you everything. You know, the higher rated the mare is, the better stallion they're generally going to get, the better opportunity they're going to get. So it is a bit of a spike sample in a way. I'm not saying it's not the case, but I just would throw a little bit of skepticism at it being as direct as the numbers. The numbers are the numbers, you know. But I do approach them with a little bit of wariness.
But I do think, though, Kev, all things being equal, if you didn't know anything else about the mare, you'd rather have one rated 100 than rated 60.
Oh, of course, but you pay for it, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I personally, I think there's the weighting in terms of cost attached to the race performance is we talk about the things we forgive. That's the thing I'll forgive more than anything, because I think you get a much better discount for less raceability. And there's an awful, ultimately when we're talking about breeding, we're talking about genetics, and there's an awful lot that can happen from the day a horse is conceived to by the time they get to the race course that can limit them, that's of no fault of theirs whatsoever. You know, be it some sort of freak injury, you know, being the trainer being in horrendous form for the year the horse was in training, you know, something like that, something external, and that's not going to stand in their way of, you know, breeding a good one. So that's my own view, but like we say, there's no right or wrong answer. Sorry, Helena.
Oh, no, sorry. There was just, you were talking about studies that included those kind of statistics, and there is actually a good study from Australia that accounts for the group mares and stallions into elite and poor, so they just divided sort of 60-40. So it's quite a wide, it's not taking in every mare over 100, it's every mare over like 80 or something like that. And then they found when they rated, obviously the best race performance were the elite mare and the elite stallion. But the the worst race performance was the poor mare with the elite stallion. So like, I think, you know, you can't, the lesser mare, like, it finds it very hard, even with the best coverings, to actually produce the goods. Like, the statistics would show, and that's quite a good, robust study, I suppose, and maybe people have general experience of that as well. So you're talking about discrediting that lower rated mare, that there's always going to be the one that, like the Beatrix Potter or whatever, that will produce the bends the rules. But I think as a general business plan, probably statistics would be against you in that one.
It depends, though. You know, there's different scenarios for all of that. You know, if you've a mare that's finished fourth in a Newmarket maiden on her first start and never ran again, you know, you'd say to yourself, well, she obviously had fairly high ability. She had an injury. She never got to run again, whatever. You know, as opposed to probably the mare that's ran 10 times and is rated 45 and was never placed. You know, there's probably, you know, like her, it's hard to get over that. But, you know, if you're on a budget and you can buy a little bit more pedigree and a little bit less race performance, you know, I'd probably, as Dermot started with, you know, pedigree always comes out, and I think if you can buy a little bit more pedigree and a bit less race record, you know, I'd be all for it, whether it's unplaced or unraced.
Yeah, I'm scrambling a little bit to find the exact facts, but I remember there was a quirk there for a couple of years. I see it's been overtaken a little bit more recently, but if you looked at the best progeny produced by mares by Galileo, for a number of years there, like, I think 3 of the top 5 were out of mares that were like stone useless as race horses. I think it was the Dame of Galileo Gold, the Dame of Satsas, and there was one other as well. They're like, were...
Starfish. Was it Starfish?
Was the Starlet's sister, maybe? Was it quite a moderate race mare? Again, it's a little bit anecdotal, but I know I certainly bought a Galileo mare that wasn't much chop on the racetrack, and it was, like you say, Matt, sometimes when you like a horse, you try and find reasons to convince yourself that it's a good idea, and when you can find examples of Galileo mares that, you know, weren't much chop on the racetrack, but went on to produce Group 1 winners, it does encourage you a little bit.
But the big thing with that, Kevin, is, you know, broodmare sire, someone mentioned it, is a huge influence. And, you know, I think when you have a sire like Galileo, you know, phenomenal stallion, great broodmare sire, you know, I think you can take a little bit less from the racing record, and, you know, the fact that they're by Galileo, I think the genes are there, and it's, you know, it's probably worth more than the race record.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to the original question, like unraced, personally, I almost always skip over them, because I've found it enough times that when you're selling the progeny of an unraced, at the point the mare is unproven, you know, that you do get knocked quite heavily, because there is a fair degree of assumption built into that unraced title. You know, and like anything, like we'd probably all echo the same thing, that research is always your friend, and if you're in a position to know where the filly was trained, if she wasn't training, that you have a little dig and, you know, find out why. You know, was it because she was stone useless? Was she showing quite a bit and got hurt? You know, it's no harm to always know these things as best you can.
I think commercially, Kevin, sorry just to interrupt, I think if you're buying I think it's different as regards the size of your portfolio. Like Dermot, for example, with a big operation, can afford to maybe take more of a punt with a mare that is unraced, whatever. If you're going to buy your first mare, I think trying to not buy an unraced or an unplaced one is a good thing. Mainly because from commercially, I think if you get a filly, trying to sell a filly foal out of an unraced or an unplaced mare is hard. And I think if you're a winner, or even at least like Barry said, if you know that the mare ran once, but she was 3rd or 4th in Newmarket maiden to X horse who won it, you can at least tell people that. If there's something you can sell your horse with, it gives you a massive help. I think buying unraced or unplaced mares, if you're going to start in at the bottom breeding, I think that's a good thing to avoid. I just think if you get a filly, it's just so hard to sell them.
Perfect. I think we had a question in this neck of the woods. Was it? There we go. Microphone and all.
Yeah. What's your opinion on starting off a young mare? Like, would you send them to a proven stallion since they're relatively unexposed, or like, would you, if depending on like form and pedigree or form and rating, like, would you send them to a first season stallion or like a younger stallion instead?
I know my own rule is I always try and start them with 3 proven stallions if I can. Even less fashionable ones, you know, give the mare a chance.
You have to find out if your mare is any good, and if you breed it to an unproven sow, it turns out to be and most of them do, turns out to be no good, well then you don't know. But if you prove to a proven stallion, and you do it multiple times and she produces nothing, well your mare's probably no good. So I'd say definitely proven to unproven.
Do you have a view, Matt? Would you buy, if you particularly liked an individual, but they were buy an unproven sire out of an unproven mare, is that something you'll weight into your evaluation?
I probably wouldn't even look at the horse if it was by an unproven sire out of an unproven mare, unless I had a particular affection for the mare or stallion for some reason. I mean, if the stallion was a horse I'd bought and I wanted to look at his stock, then I'd probably be more forgiving. But generally, if there's an unproven stallion or an unproven mare, I probably wouldn't look at it.
I think Dermot has summed it up well there. Like we're in the blame game really. Now we're trying to find who's to blame, and if you send your young mare to an unproven stallion 3 times, you know it puts a lot of ambiguity into the scenario, and you could end up after your mare's had 3 runners and not know for sure if she's any good or not, and that's going to lead to you either having to make a difficult decision or keep going with a mare that might have been useless all along. So I think what Dermot's saying is, you know, find out as quick as you can, as cheaply as you can, and hope for the best.
The one thing I always find out about proven, I've noticed about proven says that as they get older, they develop enemies. And by that I mean there's an awful lot of trainers that have had bad ones. If most stallions are around long enough, they develop enemies. Now, the stallions are quite good. Statistically, they're quite good. But they've had so many of them that most trainers have had bad ones. And the trainers usually just remember the bad ones. So as the older proven stallions, sometimes it can be difficult.
And so what we're saying, Dermot, is like if someone, again, our hypothetical prospective breeder, is that you do really probably have to think about it as a 5-year project. You know, if you're going to invest into, you know, if we're playing at the lower end of the market, into proven stallions that might not be the height of fashion, that might lead to some difficult sale experiences to find out if your mare's any good. You know, we're saying that's the right thing to do, rather than trying to do a cash grab early with a first season sire.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, yeah.
In it for the long run, lads. Put on your helmet.
Matt, when you're talking about ratings of mares, would you be talking about the highest, if a mare ran to a good rating and then lost her way, would that worry you? And is maybe for Helena, is there any statistics against mares who had a lot of racing? You hear people saying that you could race the good out of the mare, that you mightn't put it into the foal, or is that kind of a myth?
Yeah, I don't know any statistics offhand about that. I haven't read anything published about it. There is a sort of anecdotal thing that sometimes mares that race, you have prolonged racing careers. Some people think that they're a little bit more masculine and maybe don't settle down as much in stud, but I'm not sure about the reality of that. I suppose the later a mare is brought to stud, so maybe it can, you know, sometimes the sooner you start with the mare, the better really for her reproductive efficiency. The cervix can be a little bit slower to relax and drain the fluid from the uterus, but generally when you're talking about a flat horse anyway, like racing her on to 5, 6, 7, that's I would find that acceptable from the point of view of reproduction, and no problem with that. Like, you know, there's some really good mares only sold recently in Goffs here that raced on and sold very well, and I'm sure they'll make good brood mares.
And on the rating question, I would. It depends how much time you have to do the research. Obviously, you'd like some longevity, that the horse actually proved his or her rating over a year or two, rather than just run once to get a good rating and never repeat it. But generally, if they've done it once and run to a decent number, then it's a good starting point. I mean, it depends how much time you've got to research into what level of form, how they achieve the rating, etc. But at least if they've done it once or twice, it's better than never having done it ever. So,
Matt, I'll give you an extension of that question on ratings when you're assessing. And I know you're a ratings-based assessor. If that rating is achieved in one of some of the less fashionable racing jurisdictions, Italy, Germany, do you still treat the rating the same?
No. I'd be more sceptical of Italian racing, because I think it's far lower level. And that's the black type example. You see a horse that's been triple black type in San Siro and Varese or something like that, versus a horse that was 94 rated, trained in the UK. I would far rather have the 94 rated than the thing that was triple black type in Italy.
So what about a 94 in England and a 94 in Italy? Theoretically the same?
No.
Not in Europe, not for you?
I mean, it's like trying to get black type. If you try, it's much easier to get black type in a race in Germany or Italy than it is in the UK or Ireland or France. So, it's all levels, but I think a racing in Italy is surely not worth the same as a racing in the UK or Ireland.
Well, if the handicappers are doing their jobs, they should be. That's the theory.
Yeah.
But look, I'm playing devil's advocate. We know there's an awful lot of bias against Italian black type, etc. But we all have seen those pages with lots of Italian black type on it. But if you go in a layer deeper, and some of them have been operating at the top of Italian racing,
I mean,
110, etc.
It's all relative, and there have been some very good horses bred out of some of those Italian pedigrees. So it doesn't mean I don't look at them, but I just wouldn't give it as much regard as French, English, or Irish black type.
Excellent. Right, who's next? There we go.
Yeah, just Dermot and Matt, just like you touched on that you only look at winners. And Matt, you just kind of touched on it there with Kevin's question. But what is your opinion on winners from Eastern Europe or Midland Europe, in Italy, Sweden, Poland? Because you see a lot of them, which would be the cheaper end of the market. But just what's your view on them?
Well, obviously the racing's weaker in those jurisdictions, and I do think, rightly or wrongly, Barry might back me up on this or not, but I think when you're selling stock, if the mother was a winner in Sweden or a winner in Poland, people do tend to turn their nose up at it, rightly or wrongly. And so I think if you're buying a mare or filly that was a winner in one of those jurisdictions, and as far as I know, I think you have to list it in the pedigree, do you not? I think you can put abroad, but
I love abroad.
I think
it's a great country.
I think that's one of the cunning pedigree change you can do. If the mare's had a winner in Greece and a winner in Sweden, you can change it to abroad, can't you? So,
now you see, Matt, you would never have bought that real good horse that came out of where was it, Kazakhstan? There, the one the Group 1 in Maidan the other week.
I'm just talking purely from a commercial perspective. I do think people turn their nose up at a winner in Poland or a winner in Greece. I mean, I was looking at a foal today here, and Mary had 3 runners. I think the winner she'd had a winner in Greece, a winner in Sweden, and a winner in Poland. And I just thought, God, if you buy this foal and put it in the yearling market, it's going to be a hard sell because everyone's just going to turn their nose up at it. I mean, she's had 3 runners, 3 winners, but they're all in funny countries, and just from a purely financial perspective, I do think it makes it tougher.
Would you not put a nice spin on that now? Continental appeal or something like that?
Well, you say that. I think the Sportsman and certainly the open yearling sale here, there was a real new influx of Italian buyers. There was 2 groups of Italian buyers giving good money for yearlings. And I've sort of kept that in my head a little bit, that if I see a really nice foal around the place that's a sibling to a real good horse in Italy, they turned up here and they were bidding 40, 50, 60,000 on yearlings. And so that is a little bit of a niche I sort of stuck in the back of my head. I got outbid by Italians a couple of times, and I just thought, now these guys have obviously got a few quid to spend, and they're now not shopping in the UK because of Brexit, because they don't want to pay VAT into the EU. So they are, those lesser racing jurisdictions are all coming to Ireland to buy or France to buy their yearlings. So, I think that's one of the real problems in the UK at the moment is the lower end. You guys here have a great influx every year of continental buyers to the lesser yearling sales. England doesn't get any of them anymore. Even in the horses and training sale last October, there was no one for those lesser horses, and it's a real problem. It's getting worse. Like Book 3 in Newmarket in October was the worst sale it's ever been in years and years, just because there was nobody from foreign countries buying yearlings, and Brexit's had a massive effect on that.
God, who would have thought Brexit was a bad idea? Next question, please.
I'd just like to ask Matt and Andy, what's their thoughts on buying progeny from a 20-year-old mare? Let the mare be a stakes winner or reduce stakes horses. Is that a no-no for you guys? With some pinhookers and agents, they don't know. Some, it's a no-no. What's your thoughts?
You go first.
Sure, I think, again, statistically, studies show that probably you're less likely to breed a good horse when the mare folds the progeny down at 20. But, I think Lodge Park bred a top-class horse was a new approach. So, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. If it was a filly with a pedigree, personally wouldn't bother me because you'd be buying her to race with the salvage value of breeding thereafter. Probably less likely to buy a colt out of a 20-year-old mare. I did notice last year I actually had one to sell, and a lot of agents and trainers were a little bit cold on them, so I just found it a tougher sell. So for pinhooking, I'd be slower to buy one personally.
Yeah, I'd answer that in two ways. Firstly, from a pinhooking angle, I'd be like Barry, talking to the big consigners. They find it really difficult to sell stock out of older mares. So if you're trying to make money on foal to yearling, I would personally not buy out of an older mare. But from a racing perspective, if you're buying a yearling to race, I would buy out of an older mare as long as she's had a good rating, a decent horse on ratings in the last 2 or 3 foals. The older mares I'm not mad on are the ones that maybe had a stakes horse first foal and they've had 8 foals since and they're all rated under 75. They're the older mares I try to avoid. But certainly from a racing perspective, buying to race, it wouldn't remotely bother me with an older mare as long as she's produced recently. That's my rule with older mares. But certainly pinhooking, I think, it's just very, very hard to make money out of a foal to yearling with an older mare. But this is why I don't mind buying them as a yearling, because I think you get a bit of value because most people just don't look at them.
You couldn't see it there, Matt, but Dermot was staring a hole in your head while you were answering that question.
No, I think if they look the part, they are the part. If you have 2 foals going up, or 2-year-olds going up the Curragh, they're hitting into the last furlong. One fella doesn't turn around to the other and say, "My mother's 20, I'm not going to win this race."
But that's what I mean, Dermot. I'm very happy to buy one out of an older mare to race. Yeah. But if you're trying to buy a foal to make money on, I wouldn't buy one. But I'd very happily buy a racehorse, a yearling to race out of a 23-year-old mare if she's done something recently. It doesn't worry me to race. I'm just saying purely to make money.
I think it's like you pointed out that statistically there's a bias against older mares on the basis that they get bred to younger sires. If you take that statistic deviant away from it, there's no difference. It's just something that's crept into the industry, and I don't subscribe to it.
But
if they look the part, if they don't look they look like an old mare's foal where the uterus is compromised and they come out like a weedy foal. Well, I wouldn't touch one of those. But if it comes out as a proper foal, well, it is a bloody proper foal.
Yeah. But if I own a mare and she's getting old, I'd always sell the progeny as a yearling, not as a foal, because I think trainers will buy one, but pinhookers won't. Yeah. So that's my view. I own a few old mares myself, and I always keep them till they're yearlings.
There's a wider point there, isn't there, in terms of for everyone in the audience and for all of us. I know when you're operating commercially, we all have our opinions, what the way to go is and what the right thing to do is, but you really can't afford to ignore market sentiment and those notions and biases in the market, even if you think they're complete rubbish. You can't ignore them.
True.
If we have the luxury of breeding the race, we could do whatever we thought was right and live or die by our results. But when you're selling into the market, things like we've mentioned a number of things, age of the mare, unraced or not unraced, nicks, crosses, etc. I think the point to take away from it is if you're in the industry on a commercial basis, like talking to people and getting out amongst the sales and listening to what the sentiment is and what people like us are complaining about in the bar afterwards that the agents were knocking our horses for. I think it's all important information into the pot when you're making these key decisions with matings and buying mares, because as we've said multiple times, these decisions, you have to live with them for a long time before you get your payout or your punishment. And the more of that information you can chuck into the pot, the better chance you have of avoiding mistakes, which I think is as much an important thing as doing the right thing. You have to avoid mistakes.
I think the foal market is very fashion-based, whereas I think the yearling market is less so. So when you're breeding, I think if you breed to a old-fashioned stallion, that I think, say, take Australia or Glen Eagles, for example, I think they're probably acceptable to a lot of trainers, but not many pinhookers are going to want to buy one. So I think when you have to think, if you can afford to keep the horse another year, I think you have to think, where's this horse best suited? So, should I sell it as a foal? If it's a sexy first season fast sire, then you probably are going to get well paid as a foal. But if you're a staying slightly antiquated stallion, then you're probably better off as a yearling. And am I better off selling this in an early sale, take the horse to Doncaster if it looks quick, or am I better off giving it more time and bringing it to, the open sale here or December sale in Newmarket? Try and think where your foal or yearling is going to be best represented, and think the buyer base, what do they want? The pinhookers want, sexy sires, speed, whereas the trainers probably want to buy something out of a mare that's proven, don't mind something that stays a bit, etc., etc. So just trying to think in your mind, right, here's my foal, where can I get most money for it? Which isn't necessarily the first foal sale that comes along.
Right, back to the floor. We've got one here. Any other takers? There we go.
When it comes to planning your matings, are you using Goldmine and Enix and all that? And also then when you're buying your foals and yearlings, are you using those same tools? Would you go and look at the Goldmine for a foal or a yearling, or are you just buying it purely off pedigree and performance?
Well, Matt, you buy the most yearlings here, I suspect, so.
I'd love to have the time or information to hand on things like nicks. When I'm going around, there's obviously so many sales nowadays. In the yearling sale season, I bounce from one sale to the next. So it's very almost impossible to do sufficient research on nicks and things. But I'd often think at a sale, I wonder if that cross works, or has. There's certain things that pop into my head when I'm looking at a pedigree at a sale, and there's information that I'd love to have to hand that I don't always have to hand.
Well, Matt, here's a question now. I don't think we've upset enough people so far, so we'll upset people now. I would put the question to you. Are the cataloguing standards where they should be in 2024? Should we not be getting ratings in the catalogues, basic information, rather than, I find it absolutely stupefying that people have to go in 2024 and scribble in ratings on the catalogues. Is that not nuts?
Absolute bullshit, for want of a better expression. I to be honest, the reason that cataloguing is done as it is, because they're trying to kid the buyer base that this is a good pedigree. Whereas actually, if you actually had to list the ratings under each mare, it would decimate plenty of pedigrees. So
it would upgrade some too.
It would, yeah. And that's why I'm so rating based, because the pedigree page you look at is actually crap, to be honest. It's trying to make a pedigree look better than it is, which obviously suits sales companies, it suits vendors, but equally it's not really true. And that's why as I said before, trying to find an angle, we're looking at ratings rather than black type. And I'd love someone to develop a pedigree. That's what I would love to find, is a pedigree page that has way more information on it than the current pedigree we have. And I know there are sales guides which are helpful, and some of the stuff on the iPad app is helpful, but it's still, I'd agree with you, way short of, in the modern day, where it should be, I think.
In fairness, the iPad app has so much room for growth and expansion. And it's really taken off. I'd say that it's probably now 80-20 people at the sales using the iPad. So it's a great app. It's quite basic, but I think it has great scope for expansion, to include all the aspects of an extended pedigrees, ratings, or whatever.
I asked Nick Craven from Weatherby's, because I think they developed it with Equine Line, why it's not more thorough, and I think it is extremely costly to develop that app to make it more information providing, for want of a better expression. So I think there's probably it would cost a lot of money, and I suspect then they'd probably have to start charging for the app, which I think is what should happen, but it isn't at the moment.
At the end of the day, a catalogue page is, you can only put so much information. If you're a seller and you're an auction house, are you going to put the 245 rated half brothers, or are you going to put the one rated 105? You only have so much room, and of course you're going to, being a seller or an auction house, you're going to put the best you can on it.
You're going to remove one of our favourite things, though, when the pedigree proofs come out. No, take that out. That's gone. That's half the crack, as a vendor.
Well, look, it's a wider conversation again, though. But you could again make the argument that the whole system of black type is totally outdated. You know, wasn't brilliant when it came in, and you know, whenever it was the 80s, you know, it was a massive game changer for everyone. But that thing they invented in the mid 90s, the internet, is quite helpful for looking at these things.
Disagree with you, but I think like you can go and look up the ratings, like.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
you can go and look it up, like. So if you have,
it's just such a silly. It's a silly old dance, though, isn't it? You know, we all know the information's there. What percentage of people aren't looking at them now? And the dance extends to the racing product. Like, you know, we're sending fillies all the way to France to try and sneak into third in some mucky listed race so we can get a bit of black type on the page. It's silly, really. But in my opinion, I should say.
It's an excuse for a good lunch.
Sorry, we've strayed there. We've strayed. But do we have another question? Don't be shy. There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Connor.
I can answer that one, yeah. As the stander of a 27-year-old stallion, who I'll give you a few stats on his 2-year-olds from last year. No,
it was an outstanding stallion.
Look, there's obviously a bias against older stallions, you know, no doubt about it. Dermot alluded to it earlier. I'm free to talk about Invincible Spirit here, obviously. Look, he's a phenomenal stallion. Like, he's had 22 Grade 1 winners. I'm not going to go all the way through this, Kev, now, but I could.
But he's got lots of enemies, is what you're getting to, is it? As Dermot calls them.
Exactly, yeah, because like there's going to be more bad ones than good ones. No matter, Galileo had more bad ones than good ones, and I think we all know he was a great stallion. Invincible Spirit's been a great stallion. But it goes back to Matt's point about the kind of recency of it. If Invincible Spirit hadn't had any 2-year-old winners for the last 4 years, I'd say fair enough. But he's had 24, 25 2-year-old winners last year. He had 3 stakes winners. He had a Group 2 winner who was unbeaten. So if you looked at him in amongst all the first season sires, you'd say, geez, there's an up-and-comer. You know, he looks like a pretty good horse. So I think Kodiak probably quite similar, showcasing those sorts of horses who've been there, done it, they're top class. They don't get bad. You know, they may fall off. Statistically, they absolutely do from their peak. But their sort of 70% is better than most any other stallions, 100%.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you guys have experienced a lot of market sentiment with Invincible Spirit as well. Just from an outsider looking in, I can remember a time when you only wanted fillies by Invincible Spirit, and then a few years later you only wanted colts by Invincible Spirit.
Yeah. It's amazing when Kingman comes along, everyone goes, oh yeah, actually he's pretty good at siring colts, and he's had loads of colts. He's obviously had 25 colts go to stud. Sayuni, when he started, he was a filly sire, and then he's had several proper champion.
Do we believe in that conceptually? Is that ever a thing?
I don't think genetically, it's a lot of stuff in this is people's opinions and people's. We tend to follow a couple of leaders and people's, perception and reality. It tends to be reality. You know what I mean? If enough people are of that opinion, that is the reality. But genetically speaking, I don't think it's ever been proven. I don't think that performance can be definitely said to be for one sex or the other. Have you any view on that?
I think it's a snapshot in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You sit down this year and you look at it and you say the stallions, colts are 10% stakes winners to runners, and his fillies are 4%. You sit down in 2 years' time, you look at the same stat. It's probably 5.
I think Galileo started after his colts that we're all talking about, and did to his fillies, So.
Yeah, but the bigger the sample gets, the more it balances out. And it's an anecdotal thing, and I don't like dealing in anecdotes, but the only time personally I might be open to it as a conversation is if the stallion has a propensity for throwing particularly temperamental stock, and that might have more of a negative bearing on the fillies than the colts. Montju would be a potential example. Well, it was a popular one at the time in terms of a theory, but again, I don't know if I personally want to hang my hat on it. It feels a bit watery.
Yeah, a few fillies too,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, we're straying all over the place again. My fault. Apologies. Do we? Where are we? There we go. Sorry.
Kevin, just the question you were raising about the black type versus the ratings. Would you be afraid if we went to a ratings-based model that the agencies or the official handicappers could come under undue influence?
Well, sure.
It's worth so much. I mean, you see mares going through this there for Group 1 mares for 3-4 million. I mean, a couple of pounds here and there could be worth hundreds of thousands. You know, I mean, just projecting forward.
I suppose when you have people involved, there's always scope for corruption. But you'd like to think that, you know, especially when you get up to the top level, you know, what goes into, when I'm talking about kind of horses that are 115 plus, that are on the world's best racehorse rankings, like the process to decide on those numbers, like is exceptionally thorough. Like it's an international board of handicappers that go in and knock heads over them. So you'd like to think when you get to that level, like it's very robust and you can hang your hat on it. Now, when you get down lower, and especially when you get into some of the lesser racing nations, you know, that's where you could potentially run into speed bumps. But it's not something that's insurmountable. And, you know, would it have the scope to be any more misleading than, you know, a bad third in a 2-year-old listed race in Italy, you know, is on a page, than a rating being, you know, 5-6 pounds up or down wrong, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you, but to project forward, if you had some of the really big battalions and they wanted, you look after you look after your independent person well. I mean, when you're talking about a huge amount of horses, a couple of pounds here and there, you know, just because they're in a, you know, kind of hometown decision, you know.
Yeah, well, look, at you like anything, you'd like to think that people's integrity will shine through, but and I think if you did go down that road, you would have to put a focus on it being as robust as possible with as many different people. Definitely without any skin in the game that we're making those assessments.
People aren't silly, you know, they can read through ratings nowadays, and you know, sometimes the maiden winner that gets a good rating, and you know, the owner or the trainer, the intention is to sell it on to maybe Hong Kong or Australia, wins a maiden, gets a good rating, the phone never rings, you know, people can work out the form of the racer themselves. You know, the handicapper might have seen something on a day and someone's seen something different.
And I have to say, I wish handicappers were more corruptible, because there'd be occasions in this country where you win a maiden and you want them to be rated higher, and you think the handicapper will surely play ball, but he never does. We take it back to the
Kevin.
Just slightly related. Like I've found down through the years that you're always dying for this black type, especially in a racehorse or whatever. But potential often, especially in the 2-year-old, can get you more money, you know, than an actual. So if our filly shows the potential that she could be a stakes filly, you'll probably get as much, if not as more money, than if she actually won it. You know, so it's something to bear in mind. I always think you're better off selling something on the way up rather than the actual.
Yeah, and I think everyone here could relate that if they're going shopping in the next coming days, you know, if you come across what you think is a lovely sneaky mare and her 2-year-old won a maiden in France there in a smaller track by 6 lengths, and you think, oh God, you know, this might fly under the radar. Never does. Never does. And that mare always makes too much. You know, I think that the market is very informed and people do their homework. And like you say, Dermot, I think that often in the book is better value than potentially about to come on the book, which is obviously a small bit perverse, but I think it's often the case. Back to the floor.
Kevin, I just have a question for either Helena or Barry. Sorry, I'm over here. Just in relation to foal birth weight, do we have a correlation on profitability and racetrack success, like a 45 kilo versus 60 kilo? Like even if you don't have data, do you see it at home, Helena? Or
I can't remember exactly now, but it does ring a bell that the heavier foal birth weights, I think that's why we do it, is down the line they are more robust and do have better performance in the racetrack. I suppose heavier foals and foals that go on to be a little bit heavier are predisposed a bit more to OCD as well and things like that. So it's maybe a double-edged sword a little bit that way. There's other factors involved as well, but certainly, and I suppose the initial thing that you weigh a foal maybe to do with representing how well the mare has produced that foal, so like how well her placental transmission of nutrients into that foal has been. So you like to see, a good healthy foal at least over 50, 55 kilos. If you've got a foal of 45 kilos, this is undercooked or underdone. It's probably not that it's I don't know about it's affecting its long-term racing ability, but certainly in the immediate time post its birth, you're going to be a little bit concerned about this foal, taking some extra bloods, watching this foal, So, and maybe it's a little bit immature or dysmature. So, taking the birth weights is important, and you can follow it on as it goes. But initially, it does give you a little snapshot into the health of the foal within the uterus, perhaps as well. And you probably do it in your stud as well.
Yeah, like we'd have plenty of historical data on it, and. I think it's in reality it's somewhere in the middle you want to be. I think the mid to low range we find is a better place to be. The heavier foals, commercially, I'm not saying you won't make more money with them, but for an athletic career, I think we found them to be more unsound, be predisposed to more injuries, and as Helena said, OCDs and cysts and stuff like that. So I think in our sort of 40-year data, it is sort of pinpoint towards lower end of the weights, so you'd probably be better off with a foal, as you say, 100 pounds or 105 pounds rather than 150.
There's a question now, Barry, follow-on question. There'd be plenty of data there about the influence of, light programs on pregnant mares feeding into higher birth weights. Is that something that you guys do management-wise with pregnant mares?
It's not really, to be honest, no. It's not something we try and keep everything natural. If the mare carries 12 months, so be it. If she folds early, so be it. We don't try to interfere with nature too much.
Dermot,
yes, we do. We try to interfere with nature. So basically, in the hypothalamus of the horse, there's a receptor, and it's receptive to blue light, and it causes a number of different things. And one of the things it does is it tightens up gestation. Another thing it does is it brings mares into season. And I think there has been some studies done where it's suggested that it increases birth weight. So we use it extensively. We're very conscious of foals' weight. When we go to the sales, the bigger foals, without being too big, I think they sell much, much better, So, we're manipulators.
Well, Cathal, you have the casting vote. Interfere or not interfere?
No interfering. No interfering. We don't, no, but we do check every foal weight. Yeah, and it's interesting, Barry's take on it. Like, I think every owner in all the clients who would foal with us, they all want a big foal. Everybody wants a 60 kilo whopper coming out, but the reality is probably more like a 50, 55 kilo is the sweet spot, which I think stands to reason. But I think anything really from 45 to 60 is probably fine, but it's the 37, 38 kilo foal that has had a problem, and you're going to be nursing that one the whole way through, and they do find it hard to catch up. There's no point saying otherwise. They just do.
Helena, lights or no lights? Pregnant mares?
We kind of change it year on year depending on the price of electricity sometimes and whatever. But I don't think it makes a huge difference. We're not using a blue light to foal birth weights with us. But it certainly can maybe shorten the gestation slightly, and that's completely anecdotal. Some mares still carry, I don't think that it's a hard and fast rule. As regards just normal leaving the stable lights on till 10 o'clock or whatever the situation is. We don't use blue lights.
Yeah. Well, I'm on team interfere with Dermot. Yeah, not blue lights, but lights, everything, give everything lights, everything pregnant, empty. Seeing good results, but anecdotal at my sample size. Right, who do we have?
My question's for Helena. Just on, the breeding season is essentially not that long. You have 4 or 5 chances to get your mare in. You talked about at the start about managing expectations.
Yeah.
How much emphasis do you put on that first cover being as close to 100% as you can get, and potentially giving away a cycle to have a mare in better shape for the second one?
Yeah, I suppose it can be a little bit difficult because I suppose earlier in the season, the stallions are quieter. You have your pick of slots, and there's not much pressure. Some other pressure from your studs, and I think that does help. At the beginning of the year, you do get a really good chance with your barn mares. I think it's worth preparing early. Like, there's no point in arriving to February and checking your mare and saying, oh, the vet saying she's potentially for cover, but she has a bit of fluid and you haven't investigated it. Like, that's not an ideal place to start. So really, you should be starting in at least kind of December, early January to get your investigations done and have a cycle or a treatment beforehand. There's no point in covering your mare unless everything is right, I suppose is the advice. Even if you're anxious to get on early, you'll pay for it down the line with a placentitis or an early embryonic loss, or you'll lose in another way, a greater way. So I think to lose 3 weeks now is far more prudent than to lose your pregnancy later on. So I would wait until everything is right, and especially it's so early now.
Yeah, I'm going to sound the 5-minute alarm. I gave assurances to Cathy and everyone else that we tried to keep this to 2 hours in the interest of people's time, etc. So we'll have 5 minutes. So if that question is on the tip of your tongue, don't hesitate. Go for it now, and we'll get through it as best we can. Do we have another?
Don't mind. Just going back to Dermot's point on matching, like the mare with the sire as opposed to matching. So a mare with stamina, he wouldn't maybe put something speedy on her, but there is a concept, I think, I don't know how much data or evidence there is around it, but if you keep putting speed on speed, it burns out. Like if you look at Earthlight, champion sprinter in France, he's out of a mare that ran over 1.2 miles, and he's Winter's Moon, she was by New Approach, he was a Derby winner, and yet he's a champion sprinter. Like, is there much truth or evidence in that? If you keep putting speed on speed, it eventually goes nowhere. Or do anyone have anything on that?
I haven't seen any studies on it which I could categorically quote, but all I can, from my own point of view, I have some sprinting mares and I tend to breed them to the sprinting stallions. Just it works for me. And then if I have a staying family, then I breed it to a staying mare because it's easier to explain. I think, it's a good staying family. It's a type of, if you're selling it to certain trainers and certain agents that they like that type of horse. And rather than kind of bastardize it for the want of a better word, I like to emphasize it. So that's my philosophy.
Yeah, Matt has a buyer. Like, what's your feeling on those like complete mismatches? Like, we get obviously super high-profile examples of it, Galileo crossed with sprinters, but on a less sexy level. If you see something by a sprinter and that's out of a mare that won over 1.5 miles, is that a red flag for you, or is that something that you're open to or even attracted to?
Yeah, I wouldn't be very keen on it. I'd be in Dermot's camp of trying to emphasise what's good about a pedigree, and I really don't like the concept of people have these lovely staying pedigrees and they put them to a real sprinty stallion. I just don't think that makes any sense. And I'm just not a speed merchant by nature, and I really don't buy the idea that it's a slow pedigree, so we'll speed it up with a sprint stallion. That doesn't make any sense to me.
If you wanted speed, you would have bought a speedy mare in the first place.
And there's loads of brilliant staying pedigrees, so just keep breeding really cool staying horses. There's no need to put speed into it, I don't think. Especially nowadays that people are trying to look for more of those middle distance pedigrees. I think, you don't have to send a 2-mile mare to Stradivarius, but you can send a 2-mile mare to State of Rest. Which is, he brings some speed from Star Spangled Banner, but he's a brilliant middle distance horse. But that's the sort of stallion, if he makes it, is going to be really interesting because he's got some speed in his pedigree, but he was a brilliant international, multinational Group 1 winning middle distance horse. So I think he could put speed into a staying mare, but it's not like sending a staying mare to a sprinter.
Perfect.
Just wondering if the mare had wind problems while racing, would that interfere into you buying a mare? Helena.
Barry, you might have. Have you had any studies or mares that had bad wind have bred good horses or windy horses?
There probably is. I don't know them personal preference. It wouldn't be something. I find Helena will probably know more, but it is hereditary.
it's not something that if it was for Juddmonte, you were breeding to race and hoping to produce Group 1 horses, and you had a mare that was unraced because she had a very bad wind issue or had multiple wind surgeries or whatever. It wouldn't be something we'd be looking to breed from. And come back to your questions earlier on about how we choose what to sell. Some of them fillies, again, if we have a lot of the family, you'd say, look, she was a one-time winner, she had a slight wind issue, we put her into sales and move her on.
And sure, look, when it comes to fillies that raced in Britain in recent years, we have it in the farm now. So it's something that as buyers we can wait because we know about it and we can make a decision based on that. That's an incomplete set of data. We don't get that information over here.
Is that likely to change, do you think?
No, that's $1 million question. Why shouldn't it? I don't think it's the sky hasn't fallen.
The question was it likely to change?
You know what Irish racing is like. But I don't think the sky has fallen in Britain because of it. I think as a breeder, as a buyer, I want that information. I think it's valuable. I can weight it. I may attach no weight to it. I may attach significant weight to it. But when I have it, I can sort that out. I'm not relying on being told or having to go investigating. Information is power.
The problem with it though is all wind problems are not created equally.
Of course.
You know what I mean? So it's sort of, you're declaring a wind problem at this end of a scale and this end of a scale, and until you really categorize which wind problem, and you get into a whole rabbit hole, I think.
Now, funny enough, I'm actually talking to the BHA at the minute. I've been rabbiting on about that for a few years. They have that information when you declare a wind knob. You tell them, you tick a box and you tell them what the wind knob is. They have that information, years and years of data, and I can't understand why they wouldn't publish it. And they said a couple of years ago they will eventually publish it, and they haven't done it yet. I think it would be absolutely fascinating from any number of angles. If we're looking at the page, I'd much rather know if the horse was hobdated or had a cauterization. If Helena, I'm sure, would absolutely love to attack that data and look at potential effectiveness of various procedures. We could actually pull a lot of quite useful data for the veterinary profession from it. And they've got like reams of data. And I think we should perhaps be shouting a bit louder to get hold of it, because they have it, and they certainly can't give me a good reason why they don't release it. So that's maybe something that we should be looking for.
I suppose another thing is you can potentially vet those unraced mares. Like, that's something that people do at the broodmare sales occasionally, and you can insulate yourself a little bit from buying something like that inadvertently by getting a unraced filly out training scoped or something for yourself. I think of the wind issues, really only laryngeal hemiplasia is the one that has shown a strong hereditary nature. So, not everything, as you say, is created equal, and that the information on the specific operation should be published, I suppose, rather than casting a broad aspersion on a horse that's had a wind operation when it may be just a valiant attempt by a trainer to try and improve performance at the end of a certain year,
Yeah, and some trainers are very quick to go down the cauterization road. And I assume some of the fear, some of the resistance in publishing this data is people don't want, I suppose in an extreme example, a horse going to stud as a stallion that has wind knot beside him, that the fears of the commercial implications of that. But you can quote examples all day. It's not in the form book, but it's very well known that Sayuni had 2 wind operations during his career. Certainly hasn't held them back. So it's not, if you put that data out there, you would find enough exceptions for people to know that it isn't a kiss of death, that if they've had a wind up of some extent or another through their life. Again, it comes back to a few different things we've talked about. If you give people the information, we're all big boys and girls, we can do what we want with it. And if you don't give them the information, old wives' tales and other things tend to germinate in the gap that you left with your lack of information. I reckon we have time for one more question, if someone fancies it. Or we can call it. Oh no, there we go.
I'll just direct this to Matt. Would you use a stallion, just following on from that question, that has raced with a tongue tie?
Would I use a stallion in the mare? Yeah. I think so many of our horses nowadays either wear some sort of headgear or wear a tongue tie or have some sort of wind off, and I'm pretty forgiving of it generally. There'd be certain sires that over the years you'd get a trend where you sort of probably rightly or wrongly have an opinion that they might have propensity to be a solution for a number of things, not just a wind problems. Some horses get their tongue over the bit. Some of them, I've heard some trainers even say that some horses relax better with the tongue tie on them. The highly strung horses sometimes relax better with the tongue tie. So I don't think you can assume that a tongue tie is an automatic indicator of a wind problem. But as Kevin said, I think there's quite a few stallions that had wind off and have been very good at studs. So I'm fairly forgiving.
Okay, we'll give the opportunity for one bonus question if someone's absolutely if someone's itching to get in. We don't want anyone to go home disappointed. So if someone's itching, by all means, please.
In relation to like the stallion side and the mare side, do any of you look into the genetics of them and the speed gene, like the CC, CT, TT type genetics?
We haven't. We don't. That's not to say we don't value it or think it might be useful. I mean, I personally haven't done it. I think the vast majority, like to me anyway, and it's only my opinion, I think it only tells us a very narrow, specific amount of information, I suppose, and the work on the whole genome is developing, and I think more useful information is going to come from that whole process. But I think if a horse has won a Group 1 at 6 furlongs, chances are it's a CC, is my own opinion. That's only my opinion. But I don't know, maybe for breeders, do they find it more useful? Or?
Well, I suppose there's a lot of variables there, and I suppose this is another variable. But if you want to do it, you'd have to do it across all your males and all, and all, you'd have to know it for all your stallions and all the rest, and it'd be another major expense. Whereas common sense will probably tell you, just from your mare and your stallion, what's the likelihood of having a sprinter or there, so.
And you look at a developing area, like Cathal says, didn't Godolphin use an interesting piece of marketing material for Cracksman? They revealed his gene type, his speed gene profile that was kind of in contrast to what his form might have suggested, which certainly, I suppose everyone received it differently, but it was certainly an interesting way to go about getting their message across. Still went and bred an ARC winner, but it was quite an interesting thing to do, I thought. And you look at it's a developing space, as Cathal says, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I think so.
One more bonus. Look, you see, they always say this. You should always send people away wanting more. And if people are still putting their hand up, I'm taking some encouragement. And there's only a handful of people have left, which is always a good sign as well. So again, we don't want anyone going home disappointed. So here we go, a crowd pleasing audience.
Kevin, have you any home to go to?
Beautiful.
Well done, Joe.
Could you have scripted a more perfect way to call it an evening? Thank you very much. No, lads, lads and ladies, put your hands together for the panel. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being an attentive audience. We'll all see you here, I'm sure, over the coming days. And if there are any of our hypothetical cases trying to buy a mare in the coming days, we hope you're successful. And we wish you the very best of luck. Good night.